Mr. Valencia,
Present.
Mrs. Cordero,
Yes.
Mrs. Flores,
Here.
Mr. Laura.
Here. Item C, identify closed session topic items of discussion. Item A, conference with labor negotiators, CSCA, information was shared. Item B, conference with labor negotiators, SMEA, information was shared. And we will reconvene the closed session at the end of the meeting for items C and D. Can we all start? Is there somebody giving the Pledge of Allegiance or inspiration?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Ms. Blackburn, good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Santa Maria Bonita Governing Board. I'm Kathy Blackburn, and I'm honored to be the principal at Miller Elementary. Thank you for having me here this evening to represent our amazing school. We would have loved to have some of our students and our staff live with us tonight, but they are working really hard this evening. Our staff and our families have come together to have parent conferences as we speak. We've got them meeting in the cafeteria, and we're utilizing our translators and everyone. So they would have loved to have been with us. So instead, we have a recording of our Miller Mustangs from grades 1 through 6 that are super excited to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. Please stand for the It was running just a minute ago.
Murphy's Law.
Of course,
With
which is why
Tamlin.
everything was set, ready.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize.
No, it's life in the Zoom world.
Thank you.
Ms. Blackburn, you can try to either refresh it, or if you like, I can play it from our side.
Okay, this was the one that we were struggling with because it was as a .mov. Let's see if, see if it'll just start. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Put your right hand over your heart.
Ready, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the republic for
for
which
which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Hey!
They were super excited to have the opportunity to do that. And so we thank you. We are at Miller have really been, we've loved having our students back on campus and learning in person. We've been focused on loving our kids up, building them up, and really hitting hard our priority reading standards. And so we've been tracking data to monitor their progress, adjusting lesson plans to meet the needs of all of our students. This focus on reading and applying that learning has led to improved skills, higher Lexile levels, writing, creating projects that demonstrate their understanding for social studies and science, and really celebrating our differences that we then get to also see in our curriculum. So you do hopefully see some of the examples that are up on the wall in the boardroom. Our students really wanted to share their work. And so you'll see a wide range of grades and ability levels. Those pieces include some writing of poetry. They've described their settings in kindergarten, which is pretty fun, responding to some historical speeches, and of course, a couple of pieces from math, because what would learning at elementary school be without fractions, right? All levels they're learning about their parts and wholes and fractions. But tonight, in order to celebrate our students with their literacy focus, we've really done a lot of work around listening and speaking. And so our students put together a read aloud of an incredibly inspiring story. We used this video last week of our students reading to really inspire our students and celebrate Read Across America. And so this is what our student council wanted to help to share this evening. You'll actually see students from all grade levels who are reading. I think the greatest part in this is the confidence in which they read, no matter where there might be challenges with vocabulary or pronunciation. The confidence in which they read with is really the most inspiring piece of this. So we get ready to share with you a wonderful story. This is for you.
Hi, I'm Jemiah from Miller Elementary, and I will be reading Oh, the Places You'll Go. Congratulations, today is your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away. Hi, I'm Jemiah from Miller Elementary, and I will be reading Oh, the Places You'll Go. Congratulations, today is your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away.
You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoe. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know what you know, and you are the guy. You decide where to go. You'll look up and down streets. Look over with care. About some you will say, I don't choose to go there. With your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to go down any not so good shoes.
And you may not find any you'll want to go down. In that case, of course, you'll head straight out of town. It's opener there in the wide open air.
Out there, things can happen, and frequently due to people as brainy and footsie as you.
And when things start to happen, don't worry, don't stew, just go right along. You'll start happening too.
Oh, the places you'll go. You'll be on your way up. You'll be seeing great sights. You'll join the high flyers who soar to great heights.
You won't lag behind because you'll have the speed. You'll pass the whole gang and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you fly, you'll be the best of the best. Wherever you go, you will top all the rest.
I'm sorry to say so, but sadly it's true that bang-ups and hang-ups can happen to you. You can get all hung up in a prickly perch, and your game will fly on. You'll be left in a lurch.
You'll come down from the lurch with an unpleasant bump, and the chances are then that you'll be in a slump. And when you're in a slump, you're not in for much fun. Unslumping yourself is not easily done.
You will come to a place where the streets are not marked. Some windows are lightened, but mostly they're dark. A place you could sprain both your elbow and chin. Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? How much can you lose? How much can you win?
If you go in, should you turn left or right in 3/4, or maybe not quite, or go around back and sneak it from behind? Simple, it's not. I'm afraid you will find for a mine. maker-upper to make up his mind.
You get so confused that you'll start into race down long wiggly roads at a breaknecking pace and grind on 4 miles across weirdish wild space. Head, I fear, toward the most unless place, the waiting place.
For people just waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or the mail to come, or the rain to go, or the phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or no, or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting.
Waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for the wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for Friday night, or waiting perhaps for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig with curls, or any other chance. Everyone is waiting.
No, that's not for you. Somehow you'll escape all the waiting and staying. You'll find out the bright place where boom bands are playing.
With banner flip-flopping once more, you'll ride high, ready for anything under the sky, ready because you're that kind of a guy.
Oh, the places you go, there is fun to be done. There are points to be scored, there are games to be won, and the magical things you can do with that ball will make you winner of all. Frame. You'll be famous as famous can be, with the whole wide world watching you win on TV.
Except when they don't, because sometimes they won't. I'm afraid that sometimes you'll play alone, lonely games too. Games you can't win because you'll play against you. All alone, whether you like it or not, alone will be something you'll be quite a lot.
Now when you're alone, there's a very good chance you'll never meet that scares right off for your cat. These are sundown between the roads. Heather, you're young, can't be scared, so most you won't want to go on.
But on you will go through the weather be foul, on you will go through your enemy's prow. On you will go through kicking cracks howl, onward up many frightening creek, through your arms may get sore, and your sneakers may leak.
On and on you will hike, and I know you'll hike far, and face up to your problems, whatever they are.
You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. So be sure when you step with care and great tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot with your left.
And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Kid, you will move mountains. So, be your name Buxbaum or Bixby or Bray or Mordecai Ali Van Allen O'Shea, you're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way.
So we just want to say thank you to our governing board for all of your support for our students and for everything that you are making available for us to do everything that we can to best love on them, support them, and turn them into incredible readers.
And thank you, Ms. Blackburn, for all of you there at Miller, taking care of these students as your own children.
Thank you. Absolutely. I love having 920 of them.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well done. Thank you.
Item C, calendar of up-and-coming meetings and activities. March 10th, special meeting, board meeting, closed session starts at 4:30. March 23rd, regular board meeting. Item 4, public comments. The public comments are intended for members of the public to address the Board of Education on items involving the school district. Such testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes or 450 words per person, subject, and 15 minutes total in comments per topic. If an answer to a specific question is requested, the board will, if appropriate, direct administration to respond in writing. Mr. Beecher, do you have any public comments?
Yes, we do. We do have, the first one is Mr. John Raymond on a non-agenda item.
Good evening, Mr. Raymond.
He's muted right now.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
You're loud and clear. How you doing?
Oh, okay, good. Hey, I just want to say hello to everybody. I got 2 quick comments. First of all, I enjoy the programming via Zoom, but I would love to see the board open it back up to the public where the kids can come in and do a demonstration, because I really enjoy that when I was at Santa Maria and wherever else I go. And the other thing is, I know you're not going to answer the question, but when will the process for the new superintendent be laid out to make a decision? Because everybody keeps asking and everybody doesn't know diddly. And we just like to get a timeline, because I thought tonight was going to be the night of the announcement, looking at the agenda back 2 months ago when it was set forth. And I just wanted to say hi to everybody, and thanks for your time, Ricky.
Thank you, John. Good to hear from you.
We have 2 additional speakers who want to join us in public comment related to the agenda item for maps. I'm going to make the assumption that they want to participate in the public hearing portion of the meeting, and we'll ask them to join us at that time. We also have another person who has asked to speak on an agenda item, and that is Mr. Jose Segura, who wants to speak regarding return to in-person instruction. So, Brian, if you could invite him into the room, he can give us his comments on that.
Good evening, Mr. Segura. Good evening, Mr. Segura.
Oh, good evening. I'm sorry. Hello. How are you, Mr. Lara?
Good, thank you.
All right. Is this my moment?
Yes, sir. You're in.
All right. So briefly, I just wanted to take a minute and just express, I noticed that the item was back on the agenda tonight for accessing the legislation that allows for emergency authorization for virtual meetings. And I'm really hoping that this is the last virtual meeting that I'm going to see for the SMBSD for this year, that with the rollback of the pandemic era safety protocols, especially, the student masking one that's going to expire after Friday, that I'm hoping that all board meetings after this will go back to being in person. And so that folks in the community have an opportunity to really, to be there and to see your shiny, bright, smiley faces in person, and be able to experience the meetings the way they were meant to be experienced. But I also hope that the district will continue to live stream this for those folks who cannot make it to a live board meeting for whatever reason, because I think there's still value in that. There's a lot of folks I know who tune in and who have other responsibilities or childcare issues, but they can view it from home. They can view it while they're making dinner, and so that's my hope for tonight, is that we will no longer continue to have virtual board meetings starting next whatever the next board meeting is.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. Good night.
So the rest of our public comments have to do with the agenda item regarding maps. We do have a public hearing scheduled again tonight. So I'm going to assume that these folks will want to speak at that time.
Okay, perfect. Okay, item 5, approval of the agenda as presented.
I'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
I second.
Mr. Hollingshead moves, Ms. Flores seconds. Roll call?
Mr. Hollingshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye. Item 6, consent agenda.
I will move to approve the consent agenda as presented. I second.
Ms. Cordero moves, Ms. Flores seconds. Roll call?
Mr. Hollingshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye. Item 7, action items. 7A, post-MAC public hearing. At this time, the district will conduct a public hearing part of the transition to the trustee area election systems.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lara. I think at this time, I want to invite Ms. Garcia to join us and engage in the public hearing.
Good evening, Ms. Garcia.
Hello, good evening. Can you all hear me well?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, hello again. Thank you everyone for having me again. I'm looking forward to the demographer's presentation. So I don't know if there are more comments that I'd like to make later after, but I think the most important thing I would like to say tonight is that I hope you will all consider pushing the vote to the next meeting, especially considering that the 3 maps that are up for consideration tonight are the same ones from the last hearing. And there has been no public input supporting any of those 3. I also am looking forward to the survey. Maybe there will be some information there, stating otherwise, in which case, yeah, like I said, I'm excited to hear that. But I think considering that it's the same 3 maps, I wasn't able to submit my edits because it was a tight turnaround and the demographer ended up having issues with our files. I won't get into it. We weren't able to make it. We were disappointed that we weren't able to make our edit. And I know that a trustee also requested an edit that wasn't able, or they weren't made into a viable map. And I think it's really important that there's another map as an option, since there has been a request for it. So yeah, overall, from what I've heard from trustees individually, and I think also from the last hearing, there hasn't really been conversation about these 3 maps that are up for the vote. And I think it wouldn't be right for a decision to be made without hearing some other input first. But yeah, thank you all for being here tonight and excited to hearing what's presented.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Garcia. We also have in the waiting room to speak on the agenda item for maps, Mr. Vince Martinez.
Good evening, Mr. Martinez.
Hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Okay, good evening. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I've been following the map situation just from afar and video through the Zoom, and welcome the opportunity to at least express my opinions regarding what's happening here. I can appreciate the process of what you're dealing with by Zoom. I know it's not in person and people have made comments about that, but I serve in capacities like you on Zoom, and I think you guys are doing the best you can in the situation you're in. I do compliment the maps that have been presented, and I believe the one with the least variance just completely makes sense. The board as it is constituted today is very representative, in my opinion, of Santa Maria and what Santa Maria is about and about what the school district is trying to accomplish. And I appreciated Mrs. Cordero's comments last time that the school board is a function of our entire community, not of just the different districts, but of our entirety school district. And because the kids all are part of our community, we are part of our community. And I appreciate that you take it seriously to represent our community. And I wanted to thank you. And those are my comments for today. And the one I support is the number 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martinez. We have also some written comments to share tonight. We have 12 written comments. The first one is from Luwanda Lyons Pruitt from the NAACP. Greetings, Board of Education. As the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization whose mission is to ensure the social, political, and economic and educational equality of rights of all people by removing barriers such as racial hatred and discrimination, and to ensure the health and well-being of all persons by envisioning a just society in which all individuals have equal rights without regards to race, religion, gender, and or any kind of discrimination. On behalf of our officers, executive committee, and members of the Santa Maria Lompoc branch of the NAACP, we write to support the cause redistricting map. Although the map is not included in your final selection of maps, we believe it should be considered as it places Tanglewood, the Tanglewood subdivision in District 3 with other communities of interest. Additionally, we strongly oppose any plan to select a map that divides Northwest Santa Maria, which is interesting in itself, as our city of Santa Maria is also in the midst of redistricting, and in their submitted maps, none of the maps propose dividing Northwest Santa Maria. The only reason we can see to divide Northwest Santa Maria is to dilute the vote and voices of marginalized community members. In fact, one council member suggested splitting the city's District 3, as this is the district that will experience the most growth in the next 10 years, with several housing developments in process. We propose a delay in selecting a final map and your board review the maps being considered by the city of Santa Maria. We look forward to seeing the next set of maps that are equitable and give voice and consideration to marginalized communities. Yours truly, Luwanda Lyons Pruitt. The next one is from Bernarda Martinez. My name is Bernarda Martinez. I'm a community member in Santa Maria with family currently in the Santa Maria Bonita School District. It has been very discouraging to see the maps presented to the board have not been changed to take into account the feedback from community members. Hence, I'm asking that the board push back the hearing and planned voting day to ensure we have maps that better represent the communities in Santa Maria. I urge you to honor Northwest Santa Maria as a community of interest by only splitting the area into 2 districts, as it is highly concentrated with farm worker families whose voices should be unified and protected as much as possible. Thanks for your time and consideration. Best, Bernarda Martinez. The next one is from Pam Gates. Hello, as a 10-year resident of this area, I've been following all the redistricting meetings very closely, although I haven't been able to attend them all. This is your once in every 10 years or the first time ever to establish districts at all levels that more fairly and equitably represent all the residents in your communities. These decisions at the school board level will impact students and family members greatly, so it is vitally important that all voices are heard. There have been several maps submitted by your consultant, but in my mind, they do not reflect the needs of our communities as well as the residents themselves can. I know it can be difficult to get public input, but with 2 new maps just submitted, I would strongly recommend this meeting be delayed so we all have enough time to review all of the maps and offer public comment. We do not want to rush this process and live with a bad decision for the next 10 years. Thank you for considering my comments. Pam Gates. The next one is from David Dennis, to whom it may concern. Northwest Santa Maria should be only 2 districts. I strongly urge you to take time to develop a map that does not dilute the voice of Northwest Santa Maria by dividing it into 3 districts. This really matters since many of families in the Northwest are Indigenous working class and immigrant families who face particular barriers in participating in the school system. Maps that split the Northwest into 3 districts dilute the voting power of these vulnerable communities. Their voice should be unified and protected as much as possible. The Northwest needs to be only 2 districts. Delay this decision until a map can be selected that gives the Northwest communities the unified voice they deserve. Thank you for your consideration. David Dennis. The next one is from Nadia Abushanab. Hello, my name is Nadia Abushanab. I am the Advocacy Director for SBCAN. We are a community-based nonprofit that has been working throughout the county for the last 20 years. Please push back the vote for 1 more meeting so that community members have enough time to submit edited maps. Thank you for receiving my comment, Nadia. The next one is from Virginia Souza. It seems that due to time constraints and the cause endorsed map's absence, it would be a good idea to postpone the final vote. If pushing back the vote is not possible, as a 2nd-generation native Santa Marian and citizen educated entirely in the public school system in Santa Maria, kindergarten through Allen Hancock College, I would encourage votes for the cause map only, splitting the Northwest into 2 districts. I would encourage votes for the cause map, only splitting the Northwest into 2 districts. Thank you, Virginia Perry Souza. The next is from Kira Solis. Good evening, my name is Kira Solis, and I am here on behalf of Planned Parenthood Central Coast Action Fund. Education is the critical mission of Planned Parenthood, and we are proud of our bilingual community health educators that provide medically accurate, inclusive sex and healthy relationship education and information to adults, teens, and families throughout Santa Maria to help them make healthy decisions necessary to building a strong future. PPCCAF is here in support of pushing back the vote because the 3 drafted maps to be voted on were not supported by any members of the public. We would like to see an edit of map 1 to include Tanglewood, and that accounts for adjustments made across the rest of the map, as it is standard in other redistricting processes. Additionally, keeping Northwest Santa Maria as 2 district honors the people there as community of interest. A majority of families in the Northwest are Indigenous working class and immigrant families who face particular barriers to participating in the school system. Other draft maps that split Northwest Santa Maria into 3 districts risk diluting the voting power of vulnerable students, parents, and families. Northwest Santa Maria is highly concentrated with farm working families, and their voice should be kept together and protected as much as possible. Planned Parenthood Central Coast Action Fund is committed to creating healthier communities through education, and we are grateful for all your work to ensure the Bonita School District represents those in the community. Thank you for your time this evening, and please consider these suggestions for deciding communities of interest. The next one is from Kathy Sharam. To whom it may concern, I'm writing this letter to request that the board hold off on the final vote until such time that CAUSE is able to submit their edited map. I understand that some changes were requested, but then discarded. When there's a good faith effort to provide an equitable map for our communities, it is my hope that the board would be interested in seeing all of those options. The process is not easy it seems for any of us, and maybe in this case, a little more time is warranted. Please consider allowing more time. If extra time allowed is not an option, please then consider this letter as showing my support for the CAUSE map and its reflection of the Northwest Santa Maria as a community of interest. The importance of this map is that it limits the divisions to 2 districts, making it simpler for families, many of whom are Indigenous working class and/or immigrants who already find participation in the school system difficult. Additionally, limiting the Northwest into 2 districts will provide those living in this area, heavily concentrated with farm working families, with a unified voice, something that redistricting was created to achieve. The CAUSE map also creates 4 Latino CVAP majority districts, allowing for more equitable representation. The other maps result in diluting the Latino farm worker vote. Please select the CAUSE map, support fair and equitable representation. Thank you. Sincerely, Kathy Sharam. The next one is from Helen Galvan. I am requesting that the SMBSD Board of Trustee change the date of voting on the districting map from March 8th, 2022 to the next scheduled meeting date. This request is being made so that an edit of map 1 can be made with enough time to assure that Northwest Santa Maria will only be split into 2 districts and thereby protect communities of interest and lessen the diluting of their voting power. Thank you, Helen Galvan. The next one is from Janet Rios. Hello, I want to submit a public comment for the next redistricting hearing of SMBSD. See below. Good evening, board members. My name is Janet Rios. Due to work, sometimes I am unable to attend the meetings, so the meeting agenda notes are crucial for me to keep up with this redistricting process. After reviewing the recording and seeing the submitted maps, as a lifelong resident of Northwest Santa Maria who attended Robert Bruce and El Camino, I'm confused as to why you are considering breaking up Northwest Santa Maria into more than 2 districts. I don't believe that this action is in the best interest of the community that lives and attends school there. Additionally, due to the short turnaround, I believe that we need to push the vote back to give community members more time to review, ask questions, and submit changes. As you complete this process, please remember to center the voices of the people you serve and the data. Centering any self-interest is disappointing and a disservice to our students and our community. The next one is from Sandra Espino. Hello, Santa Maria Bonita School Board members. My name is Sandra Espino, district alumni and former district collaborator who worked with your junior high schools as the USCSB College Site Coordinator from 2007 to 2010. I previously submitted a comment regarding district creations within your school board. The gist of my initial comment was for linguistic communities to be taken into account, particularly Indigenous languages. I'm not sure that that was addressed in the proposed district boundary allocations. I'm further dismayed that all 3 boundary maps proposed by or to SMBSD happen to be very interestingly assign a district to all current board members. Specifically, the way the boundary of the northeast quadrant of the city is proposed in all 3 proposed SMBSD should be analyzed further. Equity, rather than ease of maintenance of the status quo, should lead this process. Ultimately, equitable district mapping should benefit our SMBSD students and their families, which I'm not sure the SMBSD proposed maps do. I ask you to consider other maps and to make your most valuable stakeholder students and their families, the focus of this process. Thank you, Sandra Espino. And that is all of the comments we have connected to the public hearing.
And with that, public hearing is closed. We'll move to action item 7B. Approve trustee area maps to use up and coming school board elections. Mr. Beecher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lara. You've all had the chance to review the maps that we had on the website last week, starting on Wednesday. I know there's been questions and we have received feedback. I do have available again tonight to lead the conversation, Mr. David Lopez of Cooperative Strategies, and then also Mr. Todd Robbins is here as our legal advisor to make sure that these maps do in fact meet the requirements of the Federal Voting Rights Act and the CVRA. So I do want to hand it over to Mr. Lopez so that he can start the conversation with his presentation.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Lopez.
Good evening. Good evening, members of the board, staff, and members of the public joining us tonight. We have some new information that might clarify some things. We're correct that we are going to cover scenarios 1 through 3 and the cause map again. One of the changes is that we have these same maps with your elementary school boundaries superimposed over them. And again, on our maps, when we have school sites and we have elementary boundaries, they're only informative pieces. We realize, and I hope the public realizes, that you represent the whole district as trustees. And so this isn't, I know a lot of times with attendance boundaries, which is a different animal altogether, people get a little bit confused on that. And so I just wanted to reiterate that the reason we have sites on this in relation to anything is because these sites are within your boundaries. And sometimes people want to see where that is in relation to that, not just trustees, but community members. Similarly, when we put attendance boundaries through these maps, it also gives another layer, another perspective, considerations that might come up. And in the years that we've been doing this, we found that it's often requested, and that's why they're there as a layer. It's not to suggest that a particular trustee is going to represent 2 school sites and no longer have the interest of the community in mind. That's not how this works. And you have a good board, and I know all of you have voiced at least once or twice that you do represent your entire district, and I believe that's how it should be. So I wanted to just say that in advance, because I know there may be some confusion in the community or thoughts that that's not the case. So these are just informative pieces. So we do have that to show. We also have another layer of complexity that we managed to extract today. I think it may make things clearer for people, especially on this topic of Northwest Santa Maria being a community of interest and respecting people that have indigenous languages. I understand that too. I support that. If there's a community of interest, we do this in other districts where oftentimes there's a particular Native American group that people want to make sure are protected, and that's admirable. And if there's enough population and they're distributed in a way that they can be in one particular area, then so be it. If it doesn't cause any problems and that's what the community wants and it works out consistent with the CVRA, we'll certainly try to emulate that or present a map. So that said, I'm gonna share my screen here and start just a few slides of the presentation. Then I'm gonna go to the larger maps. And I did find a way, I think, to do this where you can see a larger version. So let me know if you can all see this here. Can you see the slideshow presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So here we are, March 9th, and I just want to go through the process. This meeting was the second public hearing where you can vote on a map that's presented. I've heard the 15 or so comments. I know there's some surveys done too where there was feedback from your community collected. And the intent here is to either select a center tonight, or if the board decides to push this we'll figure that next date out. The idea is November 8, 2022, that the first election's being held with these particular areas. The considerations that go into this, we've met these in every scenario that we proposed. You know, there are some considerations that come up in districts. And in your particular case, I think we're all aware that Northwest Santa Maria is, there's a desire to keep it in 2 areas, no more than 2, because of the indigenous population and the makeup of that. And then the census data, this is how your people within your community and your district's boundaries responded. It's no secret that 78% of the population identified as Hispanic Latino. And that's important because in addition to balancing it by population, as you know, we also want to make sure we don't dilute or disenfranchise protected classes, AKA historical minority groups. And in every case of the maps were submitted, there are 4 majority Hispanic Latino CVAP areas. 2 of them have pluralities in the 5th area, 1 doesn't. And that's pretty much as good as it gets when you're trying to do things like that. So then it falls back on, you know, what's the community want? What do you guys like? What's the factor, attendance boundaries? You know, where we drew the lines. But in every case, all of our lines are compact and contiguous, and they take into account this population. And then they also take into account the next slide, which is citizen voting age population. And this, of course, is a heat map of your district. I'm sorry, let me go back here. It's a heat map of your district. You can see that, and again, the larger areas have less people typically. So although it's very dark, this might be 6 families, and this may be 2, we don't know. But what we do know is that this area here in your town is extremely dense. And it runs both sides of Broadway. You know, you have the Northwest, you have the Northeast, you have the, you know, whatever you want to call it, but it runs straight up the spine of the town as far as the density. And so we make sure that when we're creating these areas that we take into account and honor this CVAP. Your largest group is Hispanic Latino. Your second largest, with about 7% of the population, is Asian. And then these are how respondents, you know, answered it. And then the citizen voting age population is an estimate that the American Surveys, Community Surveys does with monthly surveys, phone calls. They follow up with a lot of data. And this is what we use to make sure we're not disenfranchising or cracking or packing any particular protected class. So we've done that in all these situations. And I just want to show this real quickly because you'll see it on the larger map. For each scenario I'm going to cover, we have a standard map that we drew, but we also have one that shows your elementary boundaries in relation to these areas and these school sites and whatever conceptual area we drew. Again, I can't stress enough, this doesn't mean that we're expecting any trustees just to you know, be focused on the attendance boundaries that cross them or the school sites in their area. You're board of trustees and you represent the whole district. This is strictly for informational pieces. Sometimes people in the community find it helpful. Sometimes board members do. So by default, we provide this. And I wish I had done this the first time around, but we didn't. We're under a time crunch. And now, you know, with about 50 of these across the state going on, now we can do some more layers here. So we've included that all. And that said, I'm going, unless there's any questions about this particular portion here, I'm going to go back to the main maps and cover that. Okay, so starting with scenario 1, we propose this, and all 3 of them we propose because we think they are fundamentally sound. They are clean, they're compact, contiguous. We felt they represented your communities, they were population balanced. And the new information we have to share for you is not only that here's how the elementary bounds intersect this, and you can mull that over, you know, in your own time, or you can see that. I mean, it's been on the district's website for a week. Just see how it plays into this. The big issue that I keep hearing is that Northwest Santa Maria needs to be 2 areas. And why is that? Because there's a sense that that's where the indigenous language population resides. I understand that concern. And unfortunately, when people take the census, it doesn't have, Persian, or they doesn't have this. It doesn't have a type of Mixteco language. The categories are what they are for now. Maybe in the future, they'll break it down even more. And some people in mixed ethnic groups, they have to decide which one they are or pick other. So it's not a perfect thing, but this is why we rely on the board and the community to tell us there's a community of interest. And in your case, what I'm hearing from your community is that Northwest Santa Maria has the highest concentration of indigenous farm workers, laborers, and they should be respected because they're concentrated here. So what we did was we gathered some information, and this is very hard to come by, but I want to share this with you. In addition to balancing it by population, this is a 5.2% variance. Your ideal population per trustee area is here.
David, can you make that bigger? Those
Yeah,
numbers that you
I
just
can
showed?
make that bigger. How's that?
Perfect.
There you go.
Okay. Whoops. I keep clicking on this and it's sending it into overdrive. Is that big enough for you? Want one more? Okay.
Perfection.
The table in the middle is just informative. It gives you an idea of the population 18 and over, again, from the census, how people voted, how people responded to it based on your age. This isn't doesn't have a bearing on it, but sometimes people like to see it as an informative piece. And then as you look down here to citizen voting age population, or CVAP, this is what I was talking about. 4 of your trustee areas in this scenario, 1, 2, 3, and 4, have a Hispanic Latino majority. And this one has a high concentration too, although we don't call it a plurality because it's 4.3% less than the next highest ethnic group. So this is a fundamentally sound map. It's compliant with the CVRA. And we thought with some of the feedback and the data that we just received, we thought we'd show you another component. This is languages spoken at home. We have 9 indigenous languages that we combined. This is data provided by the school district. We have that, Spanish and English and other. So these are the predominant languages, and we grouped 9 of them in here. And if you want to know what that is, I'll read it to you. It's and I apologize if I don't pronounce these correctly. It's Amuzgo, Chinateco, Mixtec, Mixteco Alto, Mixteco Bajo, Nahuatl, Tecuate, Triqui, and Zapoteco. Those are the 9 languages that we identified from the data provided to the school district that we felt comfortable putting together in indigenous languages. And that obviously is the only baseline we have. There's not other empirical evidence to suggest, how many people per household, how many people don't have kids, any of that. But it gives us a good baseline to see the distribution. So in this particular scenario, area 3 has the highest concentration. Area 2 and 4 have about the same. So I want to highlight that for indigenous population. Area 3 has the highest, 2 and 4 have about the same. And in this map configuration, that would be this. This area, trustee area 2, has the highest concentration of indigenous languages. 3 and 4 have the second, almost tied for second. It's not showing up in here, Northwest Santa Maria. Although if you call Northwest Santa Maria Taylor to Main Street, I'd fully say yes, there's a high concentration of people that speak indigenous languages. And you'll see this on, and let me show it on this map. You'll see this on other maps too. And I can draw on a map just to kind of give you a ballpark area. But we wanted to do that on each of these maps so that you have a better understanding, the community does, and understands the reference point we are able to provide here. So it hopefully can alleviate some concerns. It can change the narrative. It can have people understand that these maps, as many of them are drawn, do respect communities of interest. My sense is that and the data shows that the communities of interest are concentrated on either side of Broadway, all the way down to Betaravia. They're not clumped together by Tommy Kuntz Junior High School or Ontiveros, although there's scatterings here, there's scatterings here, there's scatterings here. They are predominantly in the center of town. And so that might be helpful for any, future comments or concerns. And that said, I want to just jump over to scenario 2.
David, we lost you a little bit.
Sure.
You locked up. Can you go back a little bit? You were telling us because it froze up a little.
Okay, yeah. So the concentration of the indigenous languages, it really falls from Taylor Street down to Betaravia. And then on the other side of Broadway around Rice, and it weaves in and out along Broadway. There's some small pockets here, there's some small pockets here. But I would think if you were going to draw a community of interest, it would be a square in the center here, and there's a lot of population there. And so you would have several trustee areas based on population. I don't know what the city of Santa Maria is drawing, and that's not a component of what we're doing. This is concerning the population within your school boundaries. And the trustees are representing the school district. This is just a conceptual area of maps that you're voting on or considering where somebody might run out of, and is somebody in that community going to run future years? And does it respect, all the different components of the CVRA? So that said, go ahead. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think you said that trustee area 2 had the largest concentration.
Yes.
But according to the data that you shared, it was trustee area 3, and then 2 and 4 were at 12 point something. But
yeah,
area 3, which is the red, see?
Area 3 has a high percentage of indigenous language based on the amount of students or of the data we got from the school district. Area 2 and 4 are pretty much tied. So if you go back, area 3 here has the highest concentration.
Right.
2 and area 3 is red. Area 2 and area 4 here are almost tied. And I can tell you it's because of the concentration here and here. And as I said, and if you look at it kind of, in another way, the concentration is in the middle of your town, as it relates to student languages. And again, I fully acknowledge that there might be families that chose on the census Hispanic, Latino, because there wasn't Mixteco to pick, or there wasn't something else, or maybe they didn't take the census. But this has to be based on the census data, population-wise, and the CVAP numbers, and the fact that we could get some additional layer of information that suggests where the indigenous population might be strongly centered is helpful, I think. We usually don't have that. It's not a component of the CVRA, but we're sharing it with you on each of these maps because I think it may help others understand, or you understand, that these maps are all valid. They're all good as they're drawn. And there may be a sense or a feeling that this part of town has different ethnic makeup of this part or this part or this part, but it's proving that it doesn't, especially with the Hispanic, Latino, and now with this additional information. Moving on to scenario 2, the same thing. We did a layer here, and the new component here is the languages spoken at home based on the data the school district provided. Your highest concentration on this particular map is in area 3 and area 5, and to a lesser extent, area 1. So if you go back, area 3, 5, the way this map's drawn, this has the highest concentration, the red one. 5, the purple one, has the second highest, and to a lesser extent, 1. And the 1 generally starts from Taylor Street here. And so in this particular scenario, this part of the scenario of area 1 in this green area, Northwest Santa Maria, doesn't have those numbers. And again, that's consistent with what I've been saying, is that the population is strong in this area along Broadway. But I think the community sense is, no, it's up here and there should only be 2 areas. So, you know, I welcome later feedback on that or any questions you have when we get to that point. For the scenario 3 map, again, we did the same. It's the same map, but we put the elementary school layers. And I want to show you how that data at the end of this table looks in this situation. In this situation, the highest is trustee area 3, trustee area 5, and to a lesser extent, trustee area 1. So 3, 5, and to a lesser extent, 1. That would be, again, the red area, 3. And trustee area 5 would be the purple, to a lesser extent, 1. And again, I believe that's because the concentration is all over here of indigenous language spoken based on the data that we received. Turning to the cause submitted map, we took their same map and we put elementary school boundaries on it. And the colors are a little different here. In the cause map, the trustee 1 is the yellow, the 2 is the green, and the 3 up here is the red. And so when we look at the data that was supplied to us, the languages spoken at home, the most prevalent is trustee area 1. The second most is 2, and to a lesser extent, 4 and 5. So how does that play out? 1 is the highest, 2 is the second, 4 and 5 are close behind. In this scenario, 1 is right here. That's consistent with some of the other maps we showed you. And I think it was 2 that was second, the other side of Broadway. And then 4 here and 5 here came in 3rd and 4th. This northwest side, part of town, which is trustee area 3, that has the least amount of indigenous language spoken per your students. So I don't know if this helps anything, but that's why, and this is new information that came to our attention, but we knew that when we drew these, we were honoring Hispanic, Latino in every map. And you can see that it's on all sides of this town. And we did that. We created 3 maps with citizen voting age populations that have 4 majority Hispanic, 2 of them have pluralities. The cause map 4 has 4 CVAP and 1 plurality. And the difference is, I think, in our scenario 1, 2, and 3, without knowing it at the time, we reflect, I think, a very good balance of indigenous languages as they are. There's 2,510 people in your district that responded they speak one of these 9 indigenous languages at home. That's not enough to make an entire area. In fact, the distribution is such that it's all over these areas. So the theory to me, and I'm not trying to be biased, I don't care what map you pick. I want it to be best for your community and it's most reflective of you. But as a demographer with the data I have, the northwest side of town isn't clear to me that it's a community of interest. It's something the community has asked for, but this area here in your town is the most prevalent with indigenous language per your student database. I don't know what the city of Santa Maria has. I don't know what anyone else has, but that's hopefully something you take into account. Now, that said, you know, I can answer any questions, any concerns you have, as can counsel. So I'm all ears at this point.
Questions, anybody? Mr. Valencia?
One of the things that came up as I was reviewing the Voting Rights Act is that part of the reason why we're even transitioning to by trustee areas is also ensuring that that candidate races are not monopolized by money in politics, right? In other words, giving like lower income communities a chance, right? A stronger chance to run the candidate of their choice. To what extent was that a consideration during this process? Is the economic status of our community?
Well, we focused on population balance, and we focused on achieving one of the main goals of the CVRA, which is to make sure that citizen voting age population for protected classes, and I'm going to say protected classes are your traditional minority groups that have been disenfranchised historically, that is Latino, Hispanic, Black, Asian, Native American. And so we don't have economic numbers. We don't have how many people rent and how many people own. We don't have what their income level is, education. We could get that, but sometimes the more information you get, the further you get away from the basic concepts of what went into creating the maps in the first place, which is, and so no, we didn't consider that to the extent that you know, anyone asked us to, nor do we typically do that. Because that's something that could be raised as a community of interest. I think it's a double-edged sword. If you have somebody saying, I want people who make this income in this area, and then people in this income, it seems ripe for abuse, and it becomes a haves and have-nots, and so that's something we tend to stay away from unless the community and the board really pounds that home, and it's not a factor, the main factor in what we use to create these. And Todd, if you have anything to add to that, or any historical background.
No, the primary concerns with both the Federal Voting Rights Act and the California Voting Rights Act is the desire to ensure that there isn't vote dilution based on race. So other factors may be things that we look at, but when we're considering these maps, the courts have guided us with respect to the data that we're supposed to be referring to and the factors that we're supposed to be considering. So when we're first dividing the district into 5 areas, the only thing we're allowed to look at is total population. And obviously subsumed within total population are various factors, including race, economic status, home language, things of those types of criteria. But at the end of the day, we have to divide, you know, for example, 100,000 by 5 and come up with 5 areas that are as close to equal in population as possible. And then we can kind of tinker around the edges based on other factors. But the things that are driving this are total population and then citizens voting age population after that.
And it has to meet the variance guidelines of less than 10%.
Right, that's part of the total population.
Right. And as a district, the majority of our students and their families qualify for free or reduced lunch. I haven't looked at that data in a while. I'm looking over at Matt. If he can kind of, he's got that on the tip of his tongue. But, you know, Santa Maria Bonita is, in our district, we, across the board, are considered low income.
I had an easier time finding that number. I thought it was close to 83. Brian Rickey was just working on our E-rate application process. It's 85%. I had a harder time finding my mute button than getting to that number, Ms. Cordero. So thank you very much for bringing that to our attention.
Mr. Hollingsworth.
David, after looking at this again with you and then seeing these numbers on the indigenous language, is it desirable to have that percentage of indigenous languages spread out over, or see that percentage substantial in several districts versus cause where it was seemed to be concentrated in one, or a higher percentage at least than what you had, still only 26.9% as compared to some of the other districts in their scenario or what you presented?
I'm looking at the, so I'm looking at map scenario 1. There's 25.7 in area 3, which is red. So here's where the highest concentration is. So however you draw a map, it's going to be about right around Bruce, underneath Oakley, down to probably Sanchez Elementary. And none of the map scenarios, I think we're splitting hairs here if it's 25, 26, 19, because the distribution of indigenous population is spread across 5 trustee areas, and to a lesser extent, ironically, to a lesser extent, the very northwest part of Santa Maria, which was news to me too. I mean, I wanted to look at this with an unbiased view, but as far as, you know, the census data and the CVAP data doesn't support the distribution. This is just data we are able to extract from the student database. And over, you know, I think there was 16,000 plus students, 2,510 reported that they spoke one of these 9 indigenous languages at home. So you're never going to be able to concentrate them in one trustee area. I think the highest concentration is on both sides of Broadway, from about Alvin to Stoll, I guess I would say, and to a lesser extent up to from Alvin to Donovan on both sides of Broadway. So I wouldn't say it's ideal or not ideal. The important thing in this is if you have a community of interest that is in the 18,000 range and you can put them all in one area and that's the majority, that would be ideal. But, you know, we also wouldn't want to shift things around to accommodate 2,500 people spread about the district and then lose that CVAP majority minority areas for the Hispanic. And that could happen with some shifts, although it's unlikely in the center of town.
And that's what I was, I was kind of more confirming it, as well as asking that it really, because of the dispersion of folks across a wide spread or wide part of the boundaries of the city itself, like you said, like you originally said, even from Taylor, maybe even down to Betaravia, and on either side of Broadway, it makes it really tough to kind of carve out someplace where there would be perfect representation or what have you.
Yeah, and unfortunately too, I think one or more of you brought this up, and this is a challenge when you draw maps. Sometimes you say, look at this is great. I got 90% Hispanic Latino CVAP, or I got a community of interest, you know, a lot of them in one area. That's fantastic. And then the citizen voting age population estimates are much lower than the other areas. They're down to 5,000, not 10 or 12,000 or 14,000. And unfortunately, you see that a lot in a lot of communities where, you know, I've heard people say, well, there's a lot younger people under 18 that can't vote, or there's some kind of, fear of voting, or who knows what the different reasons are. But sometimes you see that too, and that you do everything you can to achieve getting the right people in the right areas and showing representation, but you wind up not with so many voters as you would on another part of town. And that sometimes happens too, and there's not really any way around that.
David, one of the concerns that I heard from the comments, and it's a concern that I've heard from other folks as well, is the idea of maps being drawn based on the interest of us as board members, as opposed to in the best interest of the community. And so the comment was made, I believe, that there's no overlap in any of the current districts. So my question is, to what extent is incumbency, because I know that that's one of the factors you all consider if possible, how much weight did that have when you all were creating these maps? In other words, was that a major concern of you all as you all were creating these maps, to make sure that we didn't have to run for office against each other? Or is it coincidence that none of those overlap with us competing against each other?
No, it's more of a coincidence in your case, and I'll tell you why. We try to achieve that if we can achieve the main goals of population, CVAP, honoring CVAP, making sure we're not diluting anybody's vote. Those are the two drivers. If there's 4 trustees in one area, so be it. That's going to be a nightmare, but that's how it is, because they all live in the same block. And small districts have this challenge too. They live on the other side of the street, and you're like, well, sorry, But in your case, you have enough population. You almost had 110,000. So each of these areas is large. And sheer happenstance, you all happen to reside apart from each other. And you also happen to reside in an area where we can draw compact contiguous lines. And so we did that. It may be a stronger consideration in some areas, but again, we have to honor the CVRA and the Federal Voting Rights Act first. And we also have to make sure things are compact and contiguous. The last thing you want is some kind of gerrymandered thing where you loop around and grab a trustee and then throw them back in an area just to do that. Or you go all the way over to the left or the right to balance population, but that's not really, what your community or what your board says is normal. So it didn't have a lot of weight. You were fortunate. We were all fortunate. When it came to where we stop a line here and there, maybe we said this makes more sense. Maybe we do that. But in no scenario do I think that we proposed did we just grab a star and put it in an area for the sake of it, because I would rather 2 of you are in the same area and one of you has to fall off and wait to run. But we didn't have that. We didn't have that issue with you. You're spread out. Your community is large population, and we were able to do it in a compact, contiguous way that made sense.
And to be fair, David, Cause did do that as well with their map, respected the incumbency, and also to be fair, one of the reasons that's in there, the spirit of it is to respect and the people that were voted for by the community who are sitting now, and I think so. They're trying to be respectful of the community and their votes from the last election.
Yeah, and I'm not knocking their map. I mean, there's some things they did I wouldn't do or I do differently, but you have in the let's say from 4 of you are Hispanic, Latino, at least from your surnames. Drawing maps that remove you as incumbents for some other sake, community of interest, northwest side of town, that doesn't make much sense. I would do what the board directed, but I mean, I think the maps we presented keep neighborhoods intact, keep the trustees intact, they're compact and contiguous, and they have high CVAP, Hispanic, Latino numbers and pluralities. And so there's not a lot of, there's not a lot of controversy here. There shouldn't be in any of the maps, but it just depends what you all think about one being better than the other.
I'm going to take a step out and put a plug in for the map scenario that that I think really has the lowest variance, and I think the tightest spread of the voting population, if you will. And I understand that each area, it's, you know, however many candidates run in that particular area, the person selected is majority vote. But then when you have 5 people up here and one has been voted in an area where only 5,000 people are eligible to vote, and another one is voted in an area that has 12,000 people to vote, that kind of variance, it just hits me in the wrong way. You know, we're all equal, and as you stated at the beginning, David, you know, I can't imagine there ever being a time in the past or in the future where, as a sitting trustee on the school board, I would ever make a decision based only on the needs, if you will, of the schools that are within my area. And we have, you know, built-in structures in our school system for, you know, DLAC and the LCAP and other committees where parents are very much involved in helping to guide the decisions that come to the board. So, you know, the idea that we've not had public input, I don't know, you know, as a citizen that I would get that caught up in, you know, which map is chosen. My concern really would be more with, you know, that someone capable and responsible and mindful of the community that we live in would be there. And I lost my train of thought. Well, I'll go back to the CVAP. In the scenario 3, the trustee areas go from basically 7,500 to 81 to 89 to 99 and to almost 11,000. That is the tightest voting area population of any of the scenarios. Scenario 1, it ranges from 5,000 to 12,000. In scenario 2, those are actually pretty close as well. There's 74, 81, 82, and then a little over 10,000 and 11,000. And in the map 4, again, it goes 5,400 to 67, and then jumps to 2 areas with 10,200, 10,400, and then a 12,000 voting population. So, and as you also said, David, 4 of the 5 trustee areas have a majority Hispanic vote. And whether you speak Spanish or an indigenous language, I think all of those folks have marked on their census information that they are Hispanic or Latino background. So in terms of how things are spread out in, you know, across the district, my support goes to scenario 3.
And if I may, I just kind of want to, again, kind of echo David's sentiments, just like you did, Mrs. Cordero, that this isn't a benign process in the sense that there is a lot of feeling that there is district representation specifically. In other words, that voting by district for trustees You're good. Mrs. Cordero had to shake her computer. It worked. No, and so what if depending on where I froze, my reflection was simply that this isn't a benign process in that there is a great deal of misunderstanding in what representing a district means, or being voted by a trustee by district means, in that there is this sense of regionalism within the bounds of our school district at large. And what I really want to continue to assure people is that, just as Mrs. Cordero did and just as David did at the outset, is that we are representative of an area where it's a representational thing, but that we're, just as in any other representational governance, our best interests are for the schools and the children in the whole of the district. In my experience, or the very limited experience I have with visiting districts that have districting or had in the past, that misunderstanding can be a problem rather than being a good thing. So I think the educational aspect of this, or the process that we need to go through, is really continuing to affirm that to the community, that we're here for all of the kids, that we are here to represent all of our families, and that those boundaries have taken into consideration a small portion of information, and we're trying to make the best decision based upon that, but that ultimately that decision is not going to change about how we represent the children and the families of the district. Regardless of how fortunate we are to have where the trustees fell into each of the maps, including the one that Ms. Garcia and Cause presented. So I wanted to give that assurance and just echo David and Mrs. Cordero's thoughts on that.
David, a question that I had for you is, I believe Ms. Garcia talked about having some troubles being able to submit the cause map with some edits, which to my understanding then didn't make it to our website. Can you please elaborate as to why that is, why those edits didn't get a chance to be submitted on our website? Because based on what I'm hearing from public comments, it sounds like that map has a lot of support. I think I heard just one comment in favor of a differing map. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us what's going on there?
Sure. And let me preface that by saying I've received cause maps in the past, especially down in Ventura County school districts, and they have been spectacular in that there's no errors or missing information. And the first go around, we had to make some assumptions in the cause map because there was too many census blocks, some that weren't in the district's boundaries and others that were missing. And so it requires a lot of cleanup on our part to try to get it in this format. And then ultimately, if you have missing census blocks, you have to say, well, what was their intent here? And that's not really what we're geared to do. So when we looked over it, like I said, we have a lot of these going on. We looked over it. I think we got back in the morning before the deadline and said, if they can please, you can get the district's boundaries online, and you can get the census block, just plug it in and resubmit it. And then we don't have to spend, a lot of time trying to figure out what what the intention was, or what's missing, or what do we have to throw away because it wasn't in this district's boundaries. So that was a difficulty we had, and unfortunately there was a time crunch. But you know, I have seen them present very clear maps that don't require anything. So I don't know what the difficulty was on their end, but I know they wanted to submit a different map. It's just, you know, I hope if you decide to push it, I hope that the map that comes in doesn't require us to make wholesale assumptions and find missing pieces is all.
So it sounds like there's still the opportunity, right, for those edits to be made to that map so that they can be posted to our website and we can have a clear understanding of what those edits were, which will also then allow our community, you know, more time for feedback and engagement.
I take my direction from the board on this. So.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think that was really resounding to me, the feedback from the community, right? That in our process, we've had only a matter of weeks for community engagement. And I think that's part of the reason why our feedback has been lacking. I know that in the high school district, they just went through this process and they gave our community months at a time to engage. Even for myself, I was surprised to see a vote scheduled for today, because I was under the assumption based on our last meeting that nobody in particularly was from our board was ready to take a vote. This is the second public hearing that we have, right, since the maps were posted. So our community has not had the chance, right, to chew, to digest. We have not had the opportunity to present pro and con arguments, right, for each map. And so I'm also in favor of us moving the deadline to 2 weeks from now, so that we have more time to process and our community has more time to process these maps, because the gravity and the weight of our decisions affecting the next 10 years is not a decision that I take lightly. I've also heard the endorsement of organizations like the NAACP, right? Supporting, giving us more time, giving the community more time. And I don't take that feedback lightly, especially from one of our highly respected organizations like the NAACP and Like Cause. So I definitely am in favor of advocating for all of us to have more time to think about these edits, to give you all the opportunity to make some of these edits that the community is suggesting.
And I'll speak to that too. And with respect to that, Mr. Valencia, I think that you're underestimating, or you're not listening though to what Mr. Lopez is saying, in that the information that we've been provided tonight may change some of their assumptions, because some of them sound like they're either anecdotal or they're erroneous. So I don't mean to be disparaging to the people who spoke in advocacy of those specific maps, but I think if we're going to talk about taking the time and listening to the information we've been presented, I think it's also respectful, and I'm speaking maybe to Mrs. Garcia or Ms. Garcia, or any of the other folks who advocated, that they can take some of that information and process it and say, okay, well, I didn't have that information before. So it gives them a chance to look at also the other scenario maps from a different vantage point. So I think, and all I'm saying is, I guess we shouldn't focus just on the cause map from that standpoint. I think we should, if we're going to take the step back and look at the information we've been given and share the concerns of the community, then there's information on all four maps that may lead to either different endorsements or different considerations on their part. So I think that's probably maybe a broader view of that question or that concern, because we all heard those expressions of concern or advocacy for delaying the vote for very similar reasons, and I think information that was presented tonight addressed that. So I think maybe that's probably the way we could think about that.
I agree with you, John. And in in moving through the process, there's no disrespect intended at all. A lot of times what we are doing, we're looking at evidence, we're looking at the actual information in as open-minded fashion as possible to do the right thing for all involved. So in moving forward, I'm not in favor of slowing things down so intensely that we have to wait till another time. I've been taking copious notes. I've looked at these things for 2.5 weeks daily to do my homework and understand what needs to be looked at, and asked for information and clarification ongoing so that I understood what I needed to look at in the intensity of making this decision. And David and company, I thank you for the extra hours that you've come aboard to explain some of these things to us too. A little question that should have maybe taken a half hour ended up almost an hour and 10, 15 minutes, because we are seeking the clarity to make the right decision for all our students.
If I could just for a moment, I want to do a couple things just to summarize again some of the steps that we have taken to engage the community in soliciting feedback, not just providing an opportunity, but trying to make sure that we do hear from them. And then we did hear from Ms. Garcia 2 times at the last board meeting, and we did hear from her tonight that she might be interested in commenting again based on the information that Mr. Lopez provided. I know Mr. Ricky, is she in the room still? Oh, she's not in the room now. Okay. So she's not in the room, so we don't necessarily have the ability to call her back. But I did want to at least provide some information for the board just related to our work to try and engage the community. We did meet in the LCAP stakeholders group to talk about this process, again, connected to the waiver, but to draw their attention to the fact that this process was ongoing, that the information was available on our website, and there were scheduled meetings for public input, public hearing. Had the same conversation with the DLAC group. I think it was 2 weeks after that, to again talk about the waiver specifically, but refer to the process, refer to the website, and we sent out surveys in Spanish and English at the very beginning, pre-map, to just again solicit from the community what types of features they would want to see in a map, how they might like to see them organized, and that type of feedback. And then once we had scenario maps to review, we put out an additional survey in Spanish and English just to get really what was a taste test, not a yes or no, because again, it's the community's feedback we're interested. It's the vote of the board that will authorize a selected trustee area map. And in their rankings, in both Spanish and English, it looked like the map number 1 and map number 4 were equally selected as the favorite map between both groups. And there was some difference in the ways that they approached the other rankings, but the number 1 votes for those two were both for 1 and 4 were the same. And then the final thing we did is in response to a request from the community, we did send out a parent square to inform families that we would have stations at each school site for them to vote with paper and pencil if they'd like to. And there was an example of what that looked like here in the boardroom. And this station was at every single school site. We did receive those responses, and I provided you the summary of those responses in an email. So, and summaries of each of the surveys for the board. And then again, the engagement that we've had with public comment. And I know Mr. Lopez and Mr. Robbins go through this process frequently. And so they know what is, what engagement looks like in these processes. I'm sure there are other communities where it is a very active process, but I don't think ours stands out as one that lacks engagement, nor a reflection of the feedback that we've received. in the maps that are before you tonight. The other thing I'll just comment on really quickly, Mr. Lopez touched on it a little bit, Mr. Hans did you as well. It's not safe for Mr. Lopez to assume all of the secondary changes that might be made necessary to make to a map if only one or two edit suggestions are provided to him. And he can't then interpret how best to balance out those maps across that variance requirement and all those other things that the CVRA would require. That's not something that he can't step into the shoes effectively of these groups, and he shouldn't be put in that role, right? But I just want to make that comment too, that it's not safe for him to make those assumptions. And I think the strongest statement I've heard from him is that each of these maps is a viable option. There were some that that he might see differently, even his own team might see differently, and that's true. This is a team effort, but each of these maps is compliant, and it comes down to the perspective that the board shares. That is, what is the best reflection of protecting community voice, respecting community voice, and reflecting the entire community. So I've been very impressed with the conversation the board is having, and I just wanted to throw out some of those pieces of information really quickly, and then step back into my role as interim superintendent. Let the board continue its conversation about where to go. I mean, this really is the board's business. This is not operational business within the school district. This is the board's business around how best to establish this governance structure and facilitate an equitable and fair voting process. So thank you for giving me some time to step in there, and I want to turn my time back over to the board for that.
Thank you, Mr. Beecher.
Well, I just, go ahead, Mr. Valencia.
Thank you. One of the things that I noticed in our last Friday update to the board was that we didn't get the survey, the amount of survey participants that we would have liked. So there was much to be desired in terms of the amount of people that responded. I think Mr. Beecher just recently mentioned the stations at some of our different schools. And I think the update that we got, that there was only a total of about 10 families that responded to those stations with some maps. And if I remember correctly, I think 5 of the votes for like map 1, I think it was 2 for like map 3, or the rest of the 5 were divided among the other maps. And so what that tells me is that, we need to find other ways, right, to engage our families and getting feedback. I think noticing organizations like our LCAP and our ELAC, I think it's good to notice them and say, here's the website. But honestly, it could be so challenging, right, to figure out, right, the different statistics that are on there. Like the explanation that we're getting now really helps. So I would recommend that we take some time to actually go to our DLACs and our ELACs and our migrant meetings and say, hey, here's how you can help us figure out which map is best for our community. Not by saying, just go to our website, but actually like explaining to them, right? Because this is really challenging stuff to figure out. And so I'm a board member, and I've been as connected to this work as more than the average person, and I'm still confused and figuring things out and trying to make sure that I'm making a good decision on which map is best for our community. And my decision will always be based on considering the feedback of our community, because that's who we're supposed to represent. So the feedback I'm hearing from the community is that they highly support the map that's supported by CAUSE. But what concerns me is CAUSE wasn't even able to submit the updates so that we could look at a map that best represents what the community's interests are. I've only heard one comment supporting one of our maps, thus far, between map 1, 2, and 3. And so it concerns me that we're ready to vote some members are ready to vote when we're still trying to deliberate, right? What are the pros and cons of each map? I have yet to hear that conversation. And that's why I think it's so advantageous for us to do what the community is asking us to do, which is not even delay the vote, just give our community the time that they should have had to begin with, because we started this process a lot later than our high school district. That means that we were in a bigger crunch, and that creates for a more stressful process. I know I'm definitely feeling that stress, And we shouldn't have had to be in this situation to begin with. It should have been a more drawn out process. So that's why it's not even asking for a delay. It's just asking for enough time to actually think through a good map. So that's why I'm definitely in favor of having, our demographers come back to the drawing board. A lot of our community members talked about keeping the Northwest into, 2 areas, right? Not splitting it in 3, and then being able to see, okay, what makes the most sense.
Well, Mr. Valencia, I think we showed the pros and cons on this because if I recall, CAUSE was concerned about our indigenous families, and Mr. Lopez showed it on the maps exactly where the demographics are concentrated. It's not heavily all the way on the northwest side of town, like they're saying. So I think the pros and cons have been showed to us as far as what CAUSE is asking for, of who they want to be represented, in my opinion.
And in my opinion, I think that one of the things that Ms. Garcia brought to our attention that is really essential is the fact that many of our undocumented families might not be currently represented in the census. I know from looking at the census that there was conversations around including like citizenship status, right, into the census. And that conversation scared a lot of our families. So it's quite possible that we are underestimating, right, the number of families that we have because of that fear that many of our families might not have responded to the census because of that fear. So that's why I appreciate, the voices that we're hearing from the community, because these are things that I hadn't considered. But I want to make, a good choice for either map 1, 2, 3, or the CAUSE map. But I don't feel like even I've had enough time to think through all these different things that are coming up. So if we're genuinely going to be hearing from the public and we're genuinely going to be incorporating their feedback, I need time to think about that feedback.
Well, if I recall right, that last meeting, you wanted to go right straight to a vote for map 4 when it was only the second hearing. You automatically said, oh, we need to vote for map 4. So you weren't taking all the pros and cons in at the time. And here we have all the pros and cons where we know our people are established and it's being put out there. And the people that spoke, I love it that they spoke, but I'm hoping they're still on here hearing to see exactly where they're seeing that, where we're heavily concentrated, and it is divided up in the maps. And they will be represented, but this is a school district, and like Mr. Harlan said and Ms. Cordero said, it's fine, we're gonna do these mappings, but as me, as a board member, for myself I'm speaking, I'm representing every single school in the district, not just because it's a map. This is something we have to do by law, but these are all our kids, not just where you're representing. This means you still have control to go to any school site you want. You're going to take care of every child, every district, listen to every parent. So I think they got the pros and cons on it, and I'm in favor with map 3 because I was on the fence reading all these. So, like I'm going to repeat, that last meeting, you wanted to go straight to a vote, and we weren't to vote, we were just hearing out, and you were already voting for map 4. You said you were ready to vote for map 4.
No, that is inaccurate, Mr. Lara. That is highly inaccurate. What I did request was, what I did remember saying is that I definitely, at the end of the last meeting, said, I need more time to think about this. That is specifically what I said. Never did I suggest that I was ready for a vote on a particular matter.
Yeah, you did. I can get those, we'll get those minutes.
Please do. Please set the record straight, because I can assure you that that is not the case. I'm not convinced on either map at this point, but what I'm hearing from the community is that there's a great deal of support for the CAUSE map. That causes me to pay extra attention to that map, because it seems that the majority of our community supports that map.
Yeah, but in the CAUSE map, they've done the demographics where I'm getting at. CAUSE is saying they're supporting the indigenous workers, to where they went and got the other information and stated where it's highly populated compared to what I'm saying the CAUSE map is.
And
if you look at the,
if you would, Mr. Lara, to be just to reflect on what you were saying, Mr. Valencia, about the census questions, because I agree. I hear you about the citizenship question, or the possibility of a citizenship question. Unfortunately, and I think David reflected this to us earlier, what we have to look at is trends then, right? So that's one of those instances, and this kind of data has a lot of different variables. It's very simple, right? It's not a whole lot of data points. So we have to look at trends and believe that the trend of where the population concentrations are, or where we see them now, speaks to a trend as to who resides in those areas, and make our best best decision based on those trends, and not try to make assumptions anecdotally, because we could do a disservice to one area versus another unintentionally, regardless of what map we were to choose if we made those assumptions. So I think that's one of the things that David was trying to impart to us was that there are trends we have to look at with the limited data points that the census gives us. Even like you said, even in the case that some folks may have been dissuaded from filling that information out due to whatever status they did or didn't have. I mean, we've had in the past cases of parents, and this was something that I talked with Cause about early on in my tenure, parents not participating even though they had complete documentation and all those things because of fear, right? Because of so that fear is legitimate, right? It exists, but we have to look at those trends with the data that we have, at least in my estimation. So just my reflection.
Absolutely, and my understanding is that the California Voting Act is specifically intended, right, to look out for those communities that are the most overlooked, right, that are the most marginalized. And so that's why I say, hey, thank you for bringing up these concerns, community, because you're making me see things that I otherwise would not see. And so I take that role very seriously, right, of not just thinking what do I think is best, right, for this map, but what is my communities telling me, right? All of our community members. And I think that if we make a decision today, we're being a little bit disingenuous in the sense of how can we be honest about getting feedback if we're only giving them minutes and then we have to make a vote. Our community is asking us for something different. They're asking us for more time to really think this through. And I think that's a very reasonable request.
Anybody else? Ms. Flores?
I'd like to just go around the table and see what map you might be supporting at this point in time so that we can see where we're going to go with this. And I'm right now currently supporting map number 3.
I've already stated that's the one that I tend to support. Although if push comes to shove, any one of them allows our community to express their wishes in terms of voting.
Mm-hmm.
I like the tightness of the vote, though, in terms of the example that you stated, and those were some of the things that I was looking at in trying to figure out which map could give everyone that opportunity in terms of voting numbers.
And I would say that coming into tonight, I was probably more in favor of map 1 than any of them, but looking at and I did like map 3 originally because of the low variance, but David had assured us that wasn't the
right.
the focus on. I think what he was talking about and what Linda alluded to tonight is with the CVAP numbers would tend to make me feel more strongly about that, and also seeing that the information borne out by our district information that was given tonight would reflect positively on some of the concerns that the community expressed. So if we had to, that's probably where I would be leaning, would be towards 3 right now because of those reasons.
And I was like with John, I was thinking 1 at first as well, and then getting the feedback from Mr. Lopez and looking at them again I would go with 3.
And for me, I also agree with John that my initial response when I first started looking at it was map 1. And then as Cause was talking to us about ensuring that we're not overlooking our indigenous population, our working class population, our farm worker communities, hearing the feedback today about not splitting right the Northwest in that regard, that made a lot of sense to me. And so that caused me to lean more toward the cause map at this point. At first I started with 1, and now I would say I'm more in support of I believe is it map number 4? Is that correct? Map number 4. That's where I would stand at this point, particularly in light of the community feedback, the community support.
Oh, it's locked up.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Hold on a minute.
Sure. How are
Yeah,
you?
you locked up on me too.
Yeah,
Yeah, we keep blocking out. Yeah. Hello, hello.
No, you're still locked.
So
It's the internet.
Oh, there we go. Oh, so what I was just clarifying is that initially I was started by still frozen.
Yeah, you're still frozen.
Oh, my goodness.
You're not frozen on yours because your camera shows you.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, you're
You're
good.
Okay, there we go. So what I was trying to clarify because of the glitch is that initially I was leaning towards map 1, just like Mr. Hollinshead had mentioned, and I believe Mr. Lara. And then after hearing the amount of support that is being represented by our community for map number 4, that causes me to lean more toward map number 4 to highly consider that map. So at this point, I would support the map number 4.
To make a motion. At this point in time.
Mr. Lara, can I have or Matt, maybe you can help David even too,
Sure.
like, that there is a kind of a little bit of a timing thing here and that there is a resolution following this that asks us to say that we're going to do this. Doesn't ask us for a date or any of that stuff. It just asks us to commit to the districting. So I think we can go ahead and make that commitment without necessarily choosing a map, correct? We can make that resolution to say we're pursuing that, but not necessarily choose one in item 7B.
The recommendation would be to.
True.
So
The resolution is what needs to be presented to the county as evidence.
That we've
And
committed.
Correct.
Right,
So
so-
it would reflect our vote.
So I
So
think
we have to make a vote. That's what I'm asking for, a point of order or point of procedure is. Sure. Do we have to make the vote to go ahead and then make the resolution, or can we make the resolution without a vote?
let me see if I can add in real quick. We did take a resolution to the board in October to commit to the process of creating trustee maps. That was the initial commitment I hear you kind of describing right now. What is on our agenda tonight is a resolution that selects that map and then directs the procedures that follow that selection to approach the county committee and then submit that to the elections committee. The options that are available to the board tonight would be to, I'll oversimplify, to select a map and approve the resolution, or provide direction to bring the item back, not act on the item tonight, but bring the item back to a future meeting. And then if there's specific feedback that you want to provide connected to that timeframe, that would be appropriate at that time. But I think those are the two options that the board either act on with a specific map or not act on.
And that would be bringing it back to the 23rd meeting then.
We would have to bring it back
and
to
be
the 23rd
approved
to
on
meet the
23rd.
timelines.
And it would have to be approved on the 23rd for us to adopt the resolution.
And if there were additional maps that were produced between now and the 23rd, we would need to make sure that those maps were published and available on our website 7 days prior to that meeting. But if the board was seeking more time, if the board majority was seeking more time, then that would provide more time. but it depends on the board's wishes. But those are the two things. I mean, a third option might be to alter, right, the resolution, and that would not be recommended because it's written with tight language from our lawyers exactly how to prescribe the process. But I don't want to necessarily walk by that as an option. But it's not really an option.
They either both go together or they don't, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Thanks. I just wanted clarification, just to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
So do we have a recommendation or?
I'll make a motion that we approve map number 3 to be our approved trustee area map.
I second it.
Ms. Cordero moves, Ms. Flores second. All in favor?
No.
Roll call, excuse me, roll call. Ms. Cornejo?
Mr. Hollinshead?
In light of the community's responses tonight, I will vote yes, but I would hope that they continue to give us feedback on their acceptance with the new information, and continue to reach out to us, because I understand their concerns, but I feel like that they've been allayed with this. So that with that proviso, I will say yay.
Mr. Valencia?
Nay.
Mrs. Cordero? Aye. Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye.
Thank you very much, school board, for your conversation, discussion, debate, deliberation. We'll take this forward with our council and with cooperative strategies to the next steps, so that we can successfully and promptly bring trustee map elections, trustee elections by trustee areas to the Santa Maria Bonita School District in November 2022.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you, David.
David. Thank you, Todd. Thank you for everything.
Thank you all who worked so hard on this.
Item 7, excuse me. Item 7C, Mr. Beecher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lara. I do have more information connected to COVID-19 later on in the status of school item. So I'm not going to belabor those points right now.
A point of order here. Do we have to take an action on item 7C, or was our vote?
Sorry.
Do you not have 7C in yours?
Yeah.
It's resolution 1-19.
You're right.
Okay. I just know you have to have that in the packet that goes to the county.
I feel lucky to have you here, Ms. Cordero. Thank you very much for policing my expediency with the agenda. This item is just the resolution that documents the process and the board's action for one vote on the last item.
So with that, I will move that Board of Education approve resolution 21-19. Resolution of the Board of Education of the Santa Maria School District recommending that the Santa Barbara County Committee on School District Organization approve and establish trustee areas from which the Santa Maria Bonita School District trustees will be elected in a 5-trustee area election process as
Presented.
presented.
I second.
It was moved by Ms. Cordero, second by Ms. Flores. Roll call.
Mr. Hollinshead?
Aye.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye. Motion passes. Item 7B, resolution recognizing state of emergency authorizing telecom news meetings.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you've heard, but I do have some items to talk about COVID-19 later on in the meeting, so I'm not going to necessarily cover that here. But I do want to describe for the school board, I did reach out to some of my peer group about how they're scheduling their board meetings and how they're holding them. It really is a mixture across the board of folks who are doing hybrid, which includes people in the board meeting in person and online. People are doing their meetings still online, and people are doing their meetings full and in person. There were some precautions being taken related to the guidelines that were in place a couple of weeks ago when I sent my email out, as far as indoor masking still being required. And as the board knows, we've been hearing and we've been sharing information about how those requirements are going away. One of the interesting things that I learned in reaching out to my peer group is that in the Guadalupe district, they're actually continuing to renew this resolution. However, they're conducting their board meetings in person. They're electing to conduct their board meetings in person, but they're also electing to keep this resolution in place so that if there is a need for it, that extension is still viable. And I thought that was a pretty smart idea because if anything, the things that we've learned over the last 2 years is that things can be unpredictable. And you never know what next strategies might be necessary to navigate the situation we're in. And so I believe that what I heard from the school board at the last board meeting was an interest in having our meetings in person and welcoming people back into the boardroom. And we heard Mr. Segura's support for that, Mr. Raymond's support for that tonight. I've heard it, we've all heard that for a while from folks. And I think certainly the conditions that are out there as far as the rate of infection that we're hearing, and I've got, like I said, more information on that, is low enough that we can certainly conduct it safely. And, you know, most of the folks even 3 weeks ago weren't requiring spacing. They're welcoming all into the boardroom. Some were still requiring masks because it was a mandate. Some were not necessarily still requiring masks for folks who were vaccinated. Obviously, there's no way to validate that, but that was an honor system in those districts. So that's kind of a tour around the connections that I have as far as how board meetings are being conducted. But at this time, in these conditions, I think that they support reopening our boardroom and welcoming folks back, and you know, making available hand sanitizer, making available masks if people feel more comfortable with that. But with the mask mandate being lifted, even for our youngsters after Friday, that would provide the opportunity for us within the requirements to have our students in the boardroom with us and have masks be strongly recommended. That's the word, but not necessarily be required in those settings. So I put that out there as our option, if the board is interested in conducting our board meetings in person, but also continuing to extend this resolution should it be necessary for us to conduct a board meeting in Zoom at some point in the future. But that's the information I have to share. I'd really be interested in hearing feedback from the board about how we'd like to proceed.
How difficult would it be to also have an option for anyone out there? Just keep doing what he's doing with people out there too?
If you mean by doing amazing things with technology, yes. It won't specifically be what he's doing right now. There will be other things that are going to be required for us to facilitate that process. Okay. I believe it's required that you still provide the access that we've been offering in Zoom in that in-person setting so that there's as much access as possible. And so absolutely, we want to honor that sentiment. And we started this conversation immediately after the board meeting. Mr. Ricky and his team are looking into how to make that happen. We're going to be piloting some of those settings shortly. It's one of those things where the technology is still new at this scale. And so there'll be some bugs to work out, but we're absolutely working on making that accessible. So thank you for that. Mr. Hollinshead, I saw you wish to.
Well, I just wanted to endorse the hybrid format. And I think, we asked the teachers to do a hybrid format. So we have one pilot group that's already worked through this. There may be some different logistics that we have here, but I feel confident that we can do that. And I wouldn't want to have any group not feel like that we were inclusive. And I would also ask that we be respective of people who choose or would like or need to come in masks for whatever their different reasons are, and be respectful of that. And then also the people who stay home for whatever, or stay virtual or online for whatever reason, because I know there is still some uncertainty and there's some fear out there, and so we want people to be included, but also feel comfortable and safe. But yeah, I would highly endorse having folks come back, seeing their faces. I know being on campus, I think we've all expressed that being back on campuses has made a huge difference in our feeling of a tangible connection to the sites and the kids and the teachers and admin. So I think that would be the same here. So I would highly endorse that return, and as everybody's expressed, that hybrid model.
Thank you.
I would concur with that. And, they televise the city council meetings through the government access channel.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any access to something like that?
Who gets the government access channel?
I think the high school district does. They live cast theirs on YouTube.
Yeah, I've watched theirs on YouTube for the high school.
I'm sure that all of our amazing technical prowess up here, we can inform this. No, we can't. I think we've got the right man for the job.
I know we do, but the guy's not like he's not doing anything.
But I think in response to the question, I think more people.
You're muted, Mr. Beecher.
In response to the question, I think more people will have access to our board meetings on YouTube than using a government access channel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think so.
I think the widespread use and
Yes,
access.
I know Santa Barbara County Office of Education has their, they have a channel. So I used to watch Mr. Cerrone on there, and but I don't think we can get plugged into that. But like you said, I think we got the highly qualified people that we need. Mr. Hollingshead, that's already probably working on it.
But I would agree, Mr. Beecher, with the recommendation or the suggestion that we keep this resolution in place just in case.
Yes.
So with that, I'll go ahead and move that we adopt Resolution 21-20, resolution recognizing a state of emergency and reauthorizing teleconference meetings pursuant to AB 361 to make a finding that the current circumstances meet the requirements of AB 361 and Government Code Section 54953 to conduct meetings remotely as presented.
Real quickly, I'm sorry, Mrs. Cordero, just a real quick point of order for if we're going to do it this way, rather than I want to be sure that that we've got a way to convey that we're back in person. If we're making this resolution, it could be confusing to folks, or there may be some misunderstanding. So I would just make sure that we make that evident to folks that we're back in
person, and
that this is triggered if we go back into a State of
The
emergency.
state of emergency mode, or maybe we need to add that in there?
Well, I don't know. That's changing the resolution. I just,
Yeah,
I
just
agree with,
the
I agree with
clarity.
Cordero. It's more of just about disseminating the information and making it clear to the public that we're open for business, or that we're in public, or, I mean, excuse me, in person and hybrid.
I think that's a wise move on our part, that there's some kind of separate kind of disclosure, if you will. But I noticed on our agenda, the first bullet is that the SMBSD board meetings may be viewed via live stream. And if that changes to read that they will be conducted at 708 South Miller Street, right, in the boardroom, then that will start to set the tone that this is the location that you come to view the board meeting.
As well as
also available. A second bullet will be also available for viewing on live stream. But no, that's wise. I'll check in with my friends in Guadalupe to find out how they put that word out, that both avenues are available.
We're open.
Did we second this motion?
Ms. Cordero moved.
Oh, you did, okay.
And Mr. Hollingshead seconds. Roll call.
Mr. Hollingshead?
It's true.
Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lowell?
Aye. Motion passes. Item 7E, certification of second interim report for the 2021-22 school year. Mr. Beecher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lara. To speak to the board on this tonight, we have Mr. King waiting in the wings to share a presentation and a host of information.
Thank you, Mr. Beecher. Good evening, board. So I will be going over our second interim budget that Business Services did put together. So why do we have to do the second interim budget? Is to meet the requirements of AB 1200 and to certify that the district can meet its obligations in the current and 2 subsequent years. Also tonight we'll discuss any changes in the budget since first interim. And we do have a few milestones. The instructional year is half complete. Funding has been determined for most programs, and the governor's proposed budget is released. So looking at the summary of assumptions for second interim, enrollment, we have at 16,569. Our estimated ADA for 21-22 is 14,938. And that number I'm going to come back to a little later in my presentation. And then our estimated funded ADA is 16,364. Some revenue highlights. Our revenue, LCFF revenue did go down about 623,000. That's a result of our funded ADA decreasing by 23. And that's the result of the students in our special education county operated programs. So there's less students in those programs this year. Our unduplicated percentage did slightly go down to 91.7%. We are going to receive one-time special education COVID dollars of $797,000. We do have the educator effectiveness grant of 3.6 million. This is finally now in our budget. The plan was presented by Ms. Herod in November and addressed staff development. Our lottery decreased by 246,000. That's a result of a lower estimated ADA for the year. And also our the local revenue piece, we did have an increase of 632,000 of special ed dollars. And those are ongoing. On the expenditure side, there was a tightening up of the budget around vacancies, subs, and extra time regarding salaries and benefits. Our transportation budget did increase by about $600,000. I wanted to address that. That increase as a result of one of our planning factors was off. So we've been in COVID for 2 years now, and I went back and looked at our 1920 expenditures for transportation, and I should actually went back one more year to 1819 to kind of have use a comparable year for what a full year of transportation is with non-COVID. So we do have a increase of about 600,000 in budget for transportation. And then also, since we have fewer students in our county operated programs, then the cost for those students in the programs did decrease by $190,000. So moving on to look at changes from first interim to second interim. Our total revenue did increase by 4.4 million. Expenditures did increase by 1.6. And so at first interim, we had deficit spending of 10.4, and now at second interim, we have deficit spending of $7.6 billion. On the right side there, it kind of lays out the reasons why of changes in the revenue and expenditures. Once again, LCFF revenue decrease in our ADA funded ADA. The federal revenue increase of 900,000. That's mostly the one-time special education COVID dollars we're going to receive. Other state revenue increase of 3.4 million. That's a result of the educator effectiveness grant, offset by the decrease in the lottery. Other local revenue, that is the those additional one-time special education dollars we will be receiving. Salaries and benefits, there was just a tightening there of the budget around vacancy subs and extra time. And then our services and other operating expenditures did increase by 2.4 million. That's the transportation cost, budgeting those COVID dollars, moving some dollars around in the ACES program from books and supplies and some extra time over to services. Also budgeting the educator effectiveness grant and some of our routine restricted maintenance. So looking at our revenues at a glance, we have seen significant increases in our revenue since LCFF came around. Our revenue was 110 million in 12-13, and now in 21-22 it's 322 million. But that's a little asterisk because there's a lot of one-time dollars in the 21-22 budget. Those one-time dollars are mostly COVID related. You'll see in 22-23, 23-24, the revenue kind of drops back down because those one-time dollars are not in there. On the expenditure side, as our revenue increases, our expenditures do also increase. And I wanted to point out in 21-22, that orange bar there, services and other operating expenditures, there is a big jump from 2021 to 21-22. And that's all those one-time dollars. It's the expanded learning opportunities program, $6.5 million. A lot of the COVID dollars, additional special education and ACES budget expenditures, and the services and other operating expenditures. So moving on, looking at our multi-year assumptions. Our COLA stayed the same from first interim to second interim, 5.07. For 22-23, the COLA did increase a lot. It was 2.48 at first interim. Now at second interim, it's 5.33%. And there was a slight change in the COLA for 23-24. Now looking at our regular ADA, at first interim, we go off our historical average of enrollment to ADA to kind of figure out what we think our estimated ADA will be. And we use that number to in our revenue calculations. But now at second interim, we actually have our P1 numbers, our P1 ADA, and I put a little arrow right there. It's about 1,000 less than what I thought it would be at first interim. And so that is a direct result of COVID, of the kids being in class. So with our multi-year assumptions, we do remove one-time costs related to one-time revenues. Historic restricted programs are balanced, charge indirect if allowed. And I did use our historical enrollment to ADA percentage for 22-23 and 23-24 while assuming flat enrollment. So you'll notice that our regular ADA in those 2 years bumps kind of back up. And so what we do is we take our enrollment and we multiply that times our historical average of 96.5 to come up with 15,989 for what our regular ADA would be. And that's the number I use to forecast our revenue for the 2 out years. So looking at our multi-year projections, so we have 21-22 deficit spending of 7.6. 22-23 deficit spending of 5 million, and then bumping up to deficit spending of 6.2 in 23-24. What is in there is we did remove those one-time COVID dollars in 22-23, both on the revenue and the expenditure side. There is the salary schedule increases in the multi-year, and then as a result of some declining enrollment, we will feel the effect in 22-23. And that effect is to the tune of $4.7 million in 22-23, and then 4.8 in 23-24. So moving on, fund balance in excess of minimum reserve requirement. This I have to bring to you every interim as a result of Senate Bill 858. Basically says if you have a assigned and unassigned ending fund balance greater than the 3% reserve requirement, what is that number, and substantiate why your any balance is greater than 3%. So for second interim, you need to substantiate 14.8 million, 22.3, and then 18.4.
Mr. Can you pause for a second? The board lost your audio for just a second. If you can just go back maybe like about 20, 30 seconds, sir.
Do I need to go back to the last slide? No, okay.
No, just this slide.
Okay, so fund balance in excess of minimum reserve requirement. I have to bring this to the board at every interim as a result of Senate Bill 858. What it says is that if you have a total assigned and unassigned ending fund balance that is greater than your 3% reserve required 3% reserve requirement, then you need to state what the remaining balance above the 3% reserve requirement is and substantiate why you have that. So for second interim, the amount we need to substantiate is 14.8 million. For 22-23, it's 22.3, and 23-24 is 18.4. So down below are the reasons why, the substantiation of why we have a fund balance greater than our 3% required. So we have some set aside for deficit spending, and 2 out years set aside for some PERS and STIRS rate increases, and a set aside for cash flow, COVID, and different contingencies. So moving on, looking at enrollment, it's kind of a little bit of a wild ride here, but it goes back to 2014-15. We had a high of 17,122 and 17-18, and you'll see for 21-22 it's 16,569. And in the 2 out years, we do have a growth, and that growth is generated by the increase in the transitional kindergarten. So in 22-23, it's an increase of 157, and then an additional 322 in that second out year. So looking ahead, there's been talk of a ADA cliff in 22-23, and so the good news is that the governor and the legislature have been listening and listening to everybody on this. And I want to describe what that cliff is a little bit. So going back to our 2019-20 ADA, COVID hit March of 2020. We already knew what our ADA was. We were getting our regular funding in 2019-20. And then for 2021, that was a COVID hold harmless year. So basically we got funded for our ADA from 19-20. And then moving on to 21-22. So this year we have our ADA, which is lower. Almost most school districts have a lower ADA this in 21-22. And the way you get funding is you get funding on the higher of your current year or prior year ADA. So 21-22 is lower. So we go back to 2021, but 2021 was a hold harmless year. So we're actually going back to 2019-20 for our funding for 21-22. So what that does is creates a cliff in 22-23 that we're going to look at our actual ADA in 22-23 and go back 1 year and which one's higher. They're both lower than what 19-20 would be. So that's what they talk about when they say that the cliff. But there's a proposed solution. So the current law states that the Ed Code provides for funding through the LCFF on the greater of current year or prior year. And so the governor is proposing for school districts, funding would be based on the greater of the current year, prior year, or taking basically a 3-year average. So this, if this does pass, this would help our district. It softens the blow, is what it does. So what's next? Well, our budget provides for a positive certification, and we're able to meet our requirements the current year and the 2 out years. And then on May 20th, Mr. Beach and I will be listening to the school services presentation on the governor's May revise for the 22-23 budget. And so with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Brian. I don't hear any questions. I don't see anybody heading towards asking a question. I'm waiting to see if there he is. Mr. Lara is just stepping right back into the room real quick, and he can call for the vote. Your timing is perfect. No problem.
That the Board of Education issue a positive certification of 2021-22 report and certified to the Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools that San Maria de Vida School District will be able to meet its financial obligations for the 2021, 22, 2022, 23, and 23-24 years as presented.
I second.
Ms. Flores moves, Mr. Valencia seconds. Roll call.
Mr. Hollinshead,
Aye.
Mr. Valencia,
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero, Mrs. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Lara.
Aye. Item 7F, award of RFP number 5209, WAN Area Network and Digital Transmission Service. Mr. Beecher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lara, for this one, because he is capable of all things. As you know, Mr. Ricky will be carrying this presentation for us tonight.
Good evening, Mr. Ricky.
Good evening, board. Before I start, I'd like to thank Patricia McKnight, our coordinator of purchasing, and Angela Goodman, the district's buyer, for their work and support to get us to this point. In front of you is a request to approve RFP 5209. That is for the WAN area network and digital transmission services. In plainer language, this is the physical fiber optic connections from the district office to each of our school sites. It's through these connections that staff and students are able to access all of our online programs, tools, and content. As you can see, we only had one response to this RFP. While that is unusual, I think it may serve the board to know that this firm already successfully provides other services to the district, and that their price was slightly less expensive than what we had been paying for these same services in the past. Also, I'd like to inform the board that these services are supported by USAC's E-rate program, which means that 90% of these costs are covered through that program, and the district is ultimately responsible only for 10% of these fees that are in front of you today. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Yep, the current vendor is.
Oh, okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Okay, I thought so.
So, and Brian, you said that that this cost was less than that current vendor. So that, I guess, answered a little bit of my question, is because the cost of services was 80 possible points. And so I was kind of wondering with one bid how we reference that. So the reference was basically what we're paying now, not necessarily to this being done elsewhere.
Yeah, so, right. I mean, it was our intention. I know when this was set up that it was going to be weighted 70% towards the pricing, but with just the one vendor responding, right, it obviously didn't have the impact that it would have had we had multiple vendors. But again, we're delighted to see that they came in under the cost that we've been paying in the past.
What's the time frame for actually doing this work?
Yeah. So with the board's approval, we'll be meeting with them next week, and we'll start our process to put the contract, to finalize the contract. We need to then provide that contract to USAC and make sure that the E-rate forms get filed. For this sort of project, E-rate allows us to begin early. So we don't have to wait till July 1st, which is typically when E-rate funds get renewed. We can actually start a few months in advance. That's something E-rate put in place a few years ago for situations like this. And it will take considerable time to get this project done. This is a pretty monumental project to draw fiber across all of Santa Maria from a new vendor. And so there are assurances in our bid when we put it out, the RFP itself, that we will be able to continue to use Comcast as long as necessary, and that WAVE will actually make up the difference. That's part of our RFP, so that it's to their advantage to move as fast as possible, but we will be able to continue our services with Comcast in the meantime.
Well, you answered my question, and then we'll be using Comcast till we can. Okay. Any other?
Brian, any idea why we only had one bid?
Yeah, I think it has to do with the size of the project. There's not too many companies out there that can do the scale of these projects. They're basically, pulling cable from between all the school sites. It's a pretty significant project. And then you also have rite of passageway that has to be created. So not anyone can just do that. And so WAVE already has a footprint here. So it probably gives them some ability to make those things happen. That would be maybe more difficult from some other telecommunication agencies that are out there.
And in terms of the advertising, I saw that we posted the position on January 15th and January 22. Is that the typical amount? Is that less than we normally propose for? Is that more?
It's the same that we did the last time, which is 5 years ago. It's about the same window, and it falls within the E-rate window. The E-rate defines when you can put these out, so we need to follow that calendar. Sometimes it's less than that, sometimes it's more.
You didn't get the proposal until the 20th.
Yeah. So we were anticipating having to sort through several proposals. I can tell you the last time again that we did this 5 years ago, we only had 2 proposals that time. So it's, again, with this type of work, there just aren't that many large telecommunication folks in the area. WAVE is new to us, and so that's creating some competition, which is always good.
And can you please clarify where it says the initial contract term is 1 year with 4 one-year optional renewal periods? Could you clarify what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is pretty common contract language that Ms. McKnight puts in place. And what that looks like is that we are committing to the first year, and then we will have 4 options to extend that for a maximum of 5 years total. And so that will really just be based on the quality of the service. So it gives the district an opportunity, if we're not getting the service we need, to consider different options.
Thank you.
I'll move to approve the award of contract for RFP number 5209, WAN Area Network and Digital Transmission Services to WAVE Division Holdings LLC, DBA WAVE Business, as presented.
And I'll second.
Mr. Hollinshead moves, Ms. Cordero second. Roll call.
Mr. Hollinshead? Mr. Valencia?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye, motion passes.
Item 7G, approval of job description, district support specialist, Ms. Beltran. Good evening.
Good evening, President Lara, board members, cabinet, community members. Tonight I bring to you the district support specialist job description that will serve many needed functions for our district in helping our students receive a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. These positions will provide wanted and needed ongoing professional learning for all staff on evidence-based practices in providing support and services for students. You have a summary provided to you, but we also have Director of Special Education, Eric Thompson, here this evening to answer any specific questions you may have with regards to this proposed job description. Are there any questions?
My question is this position like this the norm in other elementary and middle school districts?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Valencia. And I would say that these positions are commonplace nowadays throughout California and also throughout the nation.
And can I just, in looking through some of this, I was curious as to some of the functions as far as what exactly or how much this particular person would participate in identifying kids in need of support or participating, I guess, in the teams to do that. There's a lot about IEPs and whatnot, and is this going to be somebody who's going to help identify or ameliorate some of the disproportionality problems that or numbers that we've had before?
Yes, they certainly can, Mr. Hollinshead. One of the biggest functions of this position is to build capacity of our staff, both our general education staff working with students with disabilities and their ability to identify needs for students, as well as our special education teachers serving students in the general education environment. But also they can help support our gen ed side as well in the processes of MTSS. They can be vital in MTSS, the SST process, and also cost.
Yeah, it almost sounds like they're a bit of an intermediary or hybrid position where they really kind of help to kind of link those teams.
Absolutely.
And where's our funding derived from for these positions, and how many?
We are proposing 6 positions to support the district at this time, and I believe the funding is coming from a mixture of a grant that special education received and also LCFF. Eric, did you want to speak more specific to that?
Yeah, no, that is correct. As you heard Mr. King mention earlier, we did receive some additional special education ADA funds that will be ongoing, as well as this fits into the continuation grant as one of the areas is to help support inclusive efforts.
What's the timeline on this? Is this something for the new year, or are you bringing people aboard currently?
We would be posting these positions tomorrow upon your approval.
And so ASAP?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I see that inclusion is mentioned as part of the basic functions. So in what you described as these people doing, my assumption is that they will be at school sites primarily where the inclusion is going to be happening with our K-3 students for the next school year. So anyone who is hired would be, I'm assuming, helping with the preparation for that.
That's correct. That was a big part of our inclusion design, was having this district support team with these district support specialists that can go out and help the teachers, the gen ed teachers, help to build that self-efficacy for working with students with disabilities in their classroom. And then also to be there to support actually in the classroom from time to time, to show them evidence-based practices and progress monitoring tools, and then pull out and provide follow-up from there.
If we can also add that these folks will also be, like Eric was saying, they have skills and strategies that they're going to be supporting teachers with, but teachers in all of our grade levels have students that are far below grade level and struggling. And so many of the strategies that they'll be using in that in the lower grades, they can also be supporting teachers across the grade levels at the sites for inclusive practices for all students who need those supports as well.
Do we have enough, or how do I want to say this? I'm hoping there's people out there that we can get for these jobs. I want to say it nicely because I know we're pretty thin on teachers. So I'm really hoping we have some people out there that are going to do this. Would some of our classroom teachers be doing this? They could, if this is flown out there, they could leave and do this.
Ms. Flores, this will be posted inside to our current candidates
Okay.
first, and then we'll go out through EdJoin, whatever falls out and whatever remains as a need.
Okay.
We are meeting, we are actually going to a job fair tomorrow where we are looking for special education teachers primarily, as well as a few others at this time. We've just started the transfer process within the district, so that takes a little bit of while, but we are aggressively reaching out to every job fair that's in California.
Okay,
Eric,
thank you.
Eric, can you also just explain for the board just the pieces around, it feels like a long time ago when you did the inclusion plan for the board, in that positions are being created. And so we will have some folks internally that will want to and be able to move into these positions.
Absolutely. And this is being, these positions are certificated positions, but so it could be a teacher, but the best person for the job might also be a school psychologist or a speech and language pathologist. Varying disciplines. We want this to be a multidisciplinary team, a diverse team, bringing a wealth of knowledge to this position and to this team.
Are there any further questions?
Any other further? Mr. Valencia, Mr. Holliday, any other questions?
I have a question.
Mr.
I see in the qualification or requirements that inclusion certification training or equivalent is preferred. And is inclusion certification offered? And if so, any place close to us, or because it doesn't require a special ed credential. It could be a regular classroom teacher.
So there are inclusion specialist certification programs, and actually the district, there's a few teachers who are currently taking that. So it is a preferred qualification, but not a requirement.
It can also be provided after hired as well, Mrs. Cordero.
I'll make the motion that the Board of Education approve the job description district support specialist as presented.
Second?
Mr. Valencia moved, Mr. Hollenhead second. Roll call.
Mr. Hollinshead,
Aye.
Mr. Valencia,
Aye.
Cordero,
Aye.
Mrs. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Lara.
Aye, motion passes. Item 7H, approval of job description, technology support technician 3. Ms. Beltran.
Thank you. So back in December, when we brought you a group of 14 classified job descriptions, this job description for technology support technician 3 had to be pulled because there was an error in the attachment that accompanied the job. Well, the job description was an error. It was unfortunately pulled incorrectly from Google Drive. So then we found the correct one, worked with CSEA. They took it for their membership approval through the 610 policy with CSEA, and that has been signed off as attached in the tentative agreement that was provided for you. And this is basically a name change only from Technology and Information Systems Specialist to Technology Support Technician 3. If you have any questions regarding this position, I would probably call upon Brian Rickey to answer that. But again, this was a name change. Hi, Brian.
So is somebody currently in this position?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we only paying this person $47, Bijou?
Don't know.
Salary range?
Come on, people might think you don't know what salary schedule looks like.
Mr. Valencia has a question for you, Bijou.
Bijou, I think it was for this position that I noticed that the in the education and experience that bilingual and multilingual preferred is not on there. And so is that a result of like our contract with a union? Is that part of the issue, or why don't we have that language in there, bilingual and multilingual preferred?
At this time, Mr. Valencia, none of our classified positions, including the 14 that we brought in December, have that as one of the preferences. That is something that we will look forward to discussing with CSEA at future conversations.
Excellent. And I would like to also add that if the concern is around honoring Spanish speakers with compensation, I think that that's important, right? That we compensate our Spanish speaking folks, because that is a skill set that we are looking for. And so definitely, you know, I hope that the board supports that, and that they know that, hey, we will compensate you for this skill set that you're bringing. I believe we do some testing around that, right, to check the proficiency, but I think that's really important.
I will make sure to let them know that. Thank you.
No, and I appreciate that, Mr. Valencia, because I think as Ms. Beltran said, that this was a large number of positions, and a lot of these positions are interfacing with our students. So I think that's of great value. So thanks for that, Bijou, and
thank you,
Mr. Valencia.
Thank you both. Any further questions?
Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the job description, Technology Support Technician 3, as presented.
I second it.
Ms. Cordero moves, Ms. Flores second. Roll call.
Mr. Hollingsworth,
Aye.
Mr. Valencia,
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero,
Aye.
Mrs. Flores,
Aye.
Mr. Lara.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion item 8A, school year update. Mr. Beecher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lara. I hope you can see my screen over here. Is that what you're seeing? I can see it on the big screen. I have a few slides to share tonight about the status of schools for 2021-22. There's been a lot of news lately. I thought that it would be best for us to kind of walk through what has been the news like in meetings from tonight that has occurred over time since March of 2020. Because every time there's something new, there's always in my mind and in my heart, it's like, okay, what's next, right? And then, you know, to a certain extent, regardless of in which direction we're moving, there's some apprehension for me, and I think for a lot of folks. So I kind of want to walk through some of the ways we've been sharing this information just to kind of reframe it before I briefly touch on what we see as our go-forward position. So in the beginning, we received this message from Mr. Ontiveros, 5:57 p.m. on Sunday, March 15th, announcing that we would be closing schools. And we spent that entire weekend, many of us, together in the Sousa Center, kind of planning, preparing, deciding, deciphering, and choosing how best to move forward and communicate this information out. It was an incredibly challenging decision. Most school districts were right in step with us. And so at that time, we switched over as best we could to distance learning. We had folks packing up Chromebooks like crazy. We were serving meals to the community. And you can see here, this person's not wearing a mask, right? They didn't know at the time that they were going to be required to wear a mask. All this stuff was so new, but she's wearing gloves, right? That was a good attempt. And you can see she's using a tray. We decided to use trays to hand out our meals so that we could keep a little extra distance between us and the car where the families were. And so these were some of the steps we were taking to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 at the time, but this was a very, very challenging time. We had very few people on campus. Students were in distance learning. The directive from Santa Barbara County Public Health that is etched in my mind is that an employee who could complete their work from home has been directed to do so, not requested, not accommodated, but directed to work from home. And that was actually posted on the signs that Santa Barbara County Public Health required us to put on our doors. Everyone must wear a face covering. Everyone must maintain 6 feet of social distance, regardless of if they were working, they're walking in the hallway, if they were using the restroom. We had directional arrows guiding traffic, and public interactions were rare, and when they occurred outdoors. There were extraordinary measures that we took based on the best information we had available at the time. Starting the year, Mr. Ontiveros again, in accordance with requirements established by the County and Public Health Department. I'm sorry, I was hoping I had a line on there. SMBSD is obligated to open and distance learning. So this was the message at the beginning of the year. We were not allowed to bring students on campus. We had to practice distance learning. So again, another difficult message to send, another difficult time for us to adjust, doing the best we could under these circumstances. And these were our classroom considerations. You can see a long list of the things that at the time were a part of our mitigations. And so I'm not going to read through them all. This was a part of a board presentation that we shared, but there was a long list of things because we just didn't know. And as you know, these first rounds of infection were powerful, right, impactful. And so there were a lot of measures required. And then here's some more, one of the things that I remember vividly was trying to set up ways for us to do active screening. In the beginning, we were doing active screening for employees. It was easy to reach over and use a scanner to get someone's temperature as they were walking in and make sure they didn't have a temperature. We adjusted from there to allow more mass measurement by using video cameras. And we had those at all of our school sites while we were operating in hybrid. Mr. Ricky and his team, Mr. Cavazos, did some piloting to find out how best to make use of that. But again, to make it as easy as possible to get students on campus with active screening. And eventually we transitioned from active screening, and that too brought some apprehension amongst folks around whether or not that was the right move. But again, using the guidelines as a benchmark, we told the line on what the guidelines were. And so January of 2021, we begin to plan how to bring students back on campus. And so this is actually an excerpt from the presentations available through CDE and their Stronger Together framework. And then the provision was that elementary schools may reopen if they submit a COVID-19 safety plan and have it approved. And then once open, we're required to monitor, right, and provide supports to enforce the guidance. And at this time, this was in January, we were not at that 7-day average below 28. I think we were closer to the 50s at the time. And so we weren't able to open, and we knew we had a little bit of time and space to really plan for how to do this well. And that's the process we engaged in. And this was some of the use. You remember these slides where we were scheduling how to bring students back by grade level, so they had the space they needed in their classrooms, and we had time to really test drive in small groups with small numbers on campus, the processes we had in place. And so this is just a reminder, again, the journey we've been on for the last couple of years as we embark on this next phase. So in 21-22, this school year, we did welcome all students back to campus. Masks were required indoors. An adjustment was that there was no minimum space required in any setting. We maximized space that was available, but there was no minimum space. We did have in place exclusions for identified positive cases, identified close contacts, and COVID-like symptoms. There was a mandatory offer of independent study, which continues. In the fall, we started requiring staff to be either providing us evidence of their vaccination, fully vaccinated, or submitting to surveillance testing. And then quarantine rules were modified later on so that testing would allow them to stay in school, and extracurricular activities were limited and subject to consistent COVID-19 testing requirements. And then we all walked through that surge in infection that kind of started to rise after Thanksgiving and then really took root over the new year and in the first couple of weeks of the school year. And that is depicted here. You can see this was the surge of 2021 when we were in heavy isolation and there were lots of restrictions. This was the surge for the current year. Visually, it's dramatic, it's impactful, and you can see this double hump in the surge that they talked about a little bit. I think they talked about some of this had to do with staggered breaks. Some of it had to do with a couple other variables, but you can see several regions experienced a double peak within that surge. But one of the comments that Matt Higgs made from Santa Barbara County Public Health in the superintendent's meeting this week was that right now, the rate of infection is at the lowest it's been since the prior July. And I think we were all in that meeting, and I think here as well, very comforted by that news. Literally today, I received an email from a colleague sharing that the California Department of Public Health has updated its guidelines this afternoon. I want to say I got it like at 2:30 or 3 o'clock this afternoon. As I'm trying to finish this presentation, I'm at this slide and I get the email. And so I popped in what I could quickly summarize for the board. Effective end of day, March 11th, as you know, we are transitioning its statewide universal indoor masking requirement in K-12 education school settings to a strong recommendation that students and staff continue to wear masks. Thereafter, California affirms the authority of local health departments and local educational agencies to maintain or establish masking requirements for their K-12 settings in their respective jurisdictions. And then they do list a bunch of different ways to evaluate the need to continue masking. And it's some of the things we've considered over time. And again, we would certainly continue to respond to the experts in our area, the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department. They're the ones that can provide the best information about how to address, how to consider the impacts of COVID-19. But it does address some of the key considerations from the last slide. There continues to be no minimum social distancing. They are respectful of allowing folks to continue to wear masks. And that's something that we will want to be mindful of. We'll want our employees to be mindful of. We'll want our employees to help reinforce among students that that masks are something that people can wear, and that we want to encourage people to be respectful of the choices that others make around masks, because they'll wear masks for different reasons. But after this Friday, they will no longer be required and remain strongly recommended. We've been utilizing group contact tracing, which is a little different than the original specific contact tracing, where you would look at a single person and draw a circle around them for 24 hours and look for someone who spent 15 minutes around them in that circle within that 24 hours. Instead, we're looking at the entire group. So we might look at an entire class or across their schedule. And the suggestion is that they seek COVID-19 testing. They don't automatically get excluded, but instead seek COVID-19 testing. As you know, we provide for free on all of our campuses.
I was going to say, we're still providing that, right?
We are still.
Oh, yeah, we're out of antigen tests
When was that?
today and yesterday.
Oh,
Do you know what locations?
They were supposed to get them at El Camino.
But we are still providing that free service charge to anybody that would like them.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, because some of the staff had to go test.
Okay. No, I just wanted to clarify that because I know I had gone down and gotten tested, and I just wanted to make sure that we're still, supplying this to our staff and teachers and students, and
I know.
so that's good.
Exactly. But if you go home sick or have the conditions that are COVID-like, they send you to go get tested.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's yeah.
Yep. And so, in answer to your question, we do have our partners at Heal 360 scheduled for 2.5, 3 hours of testing at every school site and administrative office. So here and at M&O as well, each week, and then all day long at our 4 locations. And then at Tommy Kunston at Liberty, they've set up, and I believe they still maintain an actual area to serve only the general community. So that there's extra access for those folks, so that again, the priority is our staff and students. And so that's available as well. And I do appreciate hearing, and I made myself a note, anytime there is a supply shortage, whenever I hear that news, I immediately pass it along to our partners at Heal 360. And I generally get an answer within a couple hours, if not by the next morning. Generally, it's within a couple hours. And surprisingly, they can get down to the package, right? The delivery, and then we find it when that occurs. So a lot of times it's something that arrives just a little bit late, or spends a little bit of time in delivery because they come here to the Sousa Center first, then they go out to the workstation at Liberty, and then gets distributed from there to the other campuses. So usually those materials are usually within that circle somewhere when that occurs. They're running a pretty tight ship.
Yeah, it's true. I was surprised, but this was at 3 o'clock. They didn't have them, and I think they were supposed to get them on Monday. So I'm not sure what the reason was.
I think the high school is enlisted Heal 360 as well. High school district now. So
yeah, my understanding
that will decompress some of our sites maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding is that they're working in Guadalupe now. They're working on each campus in the high school. And then I understand they've also started to work in Lucia Mar, our neighbor to the north.
That's good to hear.
So each of those things can help us with that workload. So they continue to be a partner for staff and students in the general community. And then our staff also continue to have access to Quest. You remember,
Yes.
Diagnostics provides testing free of charge to our employees through a FedEx delivery and drop-off process. So that continues to be available as well. And that's a note I make there. Ms. Flores, exactly to your point, that testing for COVID-19 can impact limit the impact of lost attendance for our staff and students. We've been working on communications for staff and for families on these changing requirements. And then masks are going to continue to be available at sites. We've had that question come back as I've been putting out some of this information. We are going to make sure that masks are available. I mean, it's my expectation that we aren't going to offer them after Friday the 11th to a student not wearing a mask, but they're going to be available, and folks are going to know where they're going to be available. They'll have them, and they can ask for them. I left my mask at home. Can you provide me one? It'll be available. And so that continues to be a resource for our students and our families. And then I found this on many of our presentations over the last 24 months. All health procedures, instructional models, and routines are subject to change based on federal, state, and county guidance. Yes, that is worth a smile. That is something that we go through all the time. It's been several times, and this meeting is no different. Like I said, the CDPH guidance was updated around sometime this afternoon, mid-afternoon, in the middle of my preparation. And so I haven't had the chance to do the deep dive into those requirements. I've glossed through it, and as Dutra's glossed through it, I've shared it with the COVID response team, the groups that we've been meeting with every Friday, to make sure that we're all in alignment, that questions are being asked and answered. I think that for us on on our immediate horizon is to address some of those portions, those functions inside schools that have been normal, that have been paused or modified, connected to mitigation strategies for COVID-19, in particular, school functions like open house, science night, math night, lunch on the lawn, those kinds of things where we've been limiting the number of folks on campus. We have to look into this guidance. So it still talks about guests on campus and the educational purpose and the instructional purpose, that's the limitation, that there is an instructional purpose, that there's an educational purpose to those functions, and that it's required. We need to dig into that a little bit, but I wanted to bring that topic specifically to the school board tonight as I hear questions or comments from you, to make sure that that's on your mind and that I get a chance for some feedback on that.
Yeah, school functions, those were fun. I mean, hopefully we can get back into those and, be involved, but we'll see how it goes.
But with that, I'm available for any questions or comments about the information we've received.
That was a lot of work.
Yeah.
I kept thinking in my head, everybody worked so hard.
It shut down on my birthday. I'll never forget that.
And I do want to take just a couple more minutes just to say the thank yous that are in order. I mean, starting with every single one of us, right? The school board, the cabinet members, us being the district as a whole, all of our employees, our classified and certificated partners, our managers, our staff, and our students, that everyone has worked cooperatively and patiently to get to this point as a community. And
our parents too, because they put up with the
they have dealt with as much, and they've been the tail end of all of the uncertainty we've been trying to maintain and manage through. They get that tail end of where it moves the fastest, and they have to make the adjustment, the most dramatic adjustment. So absolutely, Ms. Flores, our parents, and then our students for that. Our partners at Heal 360, our partners with Quest, the hard work of our health services team as they continue to work on at the very center of these functions, whether it's our health assistants, our nurses, our contracted nurses, and Ms. Kleinsmith as the program specialist in charge of health services. The timeless, relentless pace of this work has been demanding, and everyone in the list that I've shared with you has stepped up to make sure that we provide the best learning environment possible for our students, whether it was remote in the beginning, whether it was hybrid in the middle, whether it was in person with a mask, and as we proceed after March 11th, what happens next. The level of effort and commitment, dedication to this has been impressive. And so I just want to make sure and acknowledge my appreciation for that hard work and just the focus, that student-centered focus on making sure they have the best experience possible.
Matt, I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, given that this is going to be such a shift, right, in the way things have been operating lately, in terms of it no longer being a requirement to wear the mask, has our district staff and each school site kind of have they had a chance to kind of discuss how to go about discussing this with students, right? I mean, I know that messages have probably been sent probably through Parent Square and things like that, but I imagine there still might be some confusion, right? Because it's highly recommended, but it's not required. Mm-hmm. And so what we're likely to have is students in class, some of them will have their masks on, some of them will have their masks off. That might be really confusing for a lot of people. So have we helped provide our staff with any guidance on how to have those conversations to just kind of make for a smoother transition, right? As this becomes part of our transition. Has that taken place yet at all?
So you bring up a really good point. We are working on some communication to share out that is going to be general and bite-sized, but we do have a site that created an amazing and adorable PowerPoint around this transition for their team, and shared it with Ms. Dutra. It was our friends at Taylor, our Taylor Timberwolves team put together this amazing presentation. And because every good idea is worth stealing, Ms. Dutra immediately asked that be shared and then, personalized for each location to make sure that information is out there in a way that our students can really identify with. So that's absolutely important. Thank you for that.
If it's adorable, can we see it?
I was just gonna say, you read my mind. I'm happy to put it in the board memo on Friday for you, and it goes out to our leaders tomorrow morning in district update. And then we've also provided, there's quite a few emails that'll go out tomorrow, Mr. Valencia. One to all staff, as Mr. Beecher was saying, and then one also to leaders on how more of the minutia of questions that might come up and pulling things out of the guidelines so that they know how to answer all the questions. Because the guidelines just came out today, we want to be doing that heavy lift for them. And so most all of that information will go out tomorrow, including parent squares to parents regarding the masking requirements moving to highly recommended.
Well, and I agree with Mr. Valencia on, especially with, I know that's going to be somewhat confusing for some of our families and certainly for kids to understand why some are wearing and some are not. But I think the encouragement of folks to continue to wear them indoors, I think we need to be observant of. But also, as we were talking about earlier, we certainly want to be respectful for the people who have, for whatever circumstances they might be incurring, that they continue to choose to wear masks or continue their practices to in their best interests for their safety or for family members, and be really respectful of one another and supportive of one another in doing so. Because I know that before or when this was all happening, there was a great deal of outpouring from staff about concerns for a family member at home or things of that nature. And so we want to still be really supportive and respectful of them moving forward.
Any other questions? No? Okay, I'd like to know the board, that the Board of Education acknowledge receipt of the status update as presented. Item 8B, reviewed Williams Act, review of administrative regulations 1312.3 uniform complaint procedures and 1312.4 Williams uniform complaint procedures. Ms. Herrick, good evening.
Good evening, board members, interim superintendent Mr. Beecher, cabinet members, and community members in the audience. This evening, I am bringing back 2 administrative regulations, and these fall under our board policy, our uniform complaint procedures. We did bring this to you in January, and it was updated and approved. And the reason we're bringing it back is, as you are aware, we're going through our federal program review, and the reviewers made just 3 recommendations. And so we are following those recommendations. There's 3 updates that were made. One of them is that a complainant has a right to describe the complaint to the governing board if they choose to. And the other one, under the first uniform complaint procedure, is that the superintendent of public instruction must provide a written report and the remedy if it's different than what the district had suggested. And then under the Williams uniform complaint, it's a very simple update, and it's that we do need to provide the complainant a response, and it should be mailed to them. So this just makes it really official that we know they got our response in the mail. And those were the updates. It's a super simple thing that we did. We just added them to the policies. And that's what we wanted to bring to you this evening.
Mrs. Herrick, just a technical point in the AR 1312.4, which and where you have indicated that it will be mailed. it says if a response is requested, it will be mailed to the mailing address of the complainant indicted on the complaint. I think
Okay.
you mean indicated.
Indicated. Thank you, Mrs. Cordero.
A big difference between
know,
indicted and
yes.
indicated.
And we know our eagle eye, Mrs. Cordero. It's been a while, Mrs. Cordero, since you did catch something. So
I'm sorry, but
we will make that change. Thank you.
A question that I have is, I
one.
noticed on that same page for where it says teacher vacancy or misassignment, it's 2B, and it says a teacher who lacks credentials or training to teach English learners is assigned to teach a class with more than 20% English learner pupils in the class. So I just want to make sure that, how do we know that we're adhering to this regulation? So how are we ensuring that that's not taking place so that we don't have a complaint against us regarding that?
I can take this, Ms. Herrick. Thank you, Mr. Valencia. I just want you to know, and the rest of the board to know, that we acknowledge that every teacher must meet this standard. If they do not have an EL authorization or CLAD, they mean the same thing. They must be put on an emergency CLAD permit, which allows credentialed teachers to be compliant and work towards obtaining a CLAD while teaching. We are also doing this for BCLAD as well, pertaining to DLI when necessary. This happens when we have applicants who come to us from out-of-state hires, as all California university programs include the EL authorization at this time. Additionally, anybody hired with an intern credential, short-term staff permit, provisional intern permit, all cover the EL authorization as well while they are working towards their preliminary credential per the CTC, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. So that is something that we work with to ensure that they have the necessary credentialing and waivers at that time to work with it. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Well, with that, I'll acknowledge the review of administrative regulations 1312.3 Uniform Complaint Procedures and 1312.4 Williams Uniform Complaint Procedures as presented, and request the administration bring back the item for action at the next regular board meeting. Thank you, Ms. Herrick. Ms. Bell.
Thank you.
Yes. Actually, we were sent an invitation to read for Read Across America Day last week, and it was very fun. The invitation came from Fairlawn, and not only did I take myself, but I invited my husband, and so we both went and each read to 3 classrooms and just had a very wonderful time interacting with the students and sharing a little bit about ourselves. I was in upper grade classrooms, and I introduced myself, and when I do that, I tell them that I used to be a teacher too. And the first classroom that I went into had not been one of the classrooms that I actually taught in, but it was right next to the first portable at the back of the school. And so I told them that I had been the teacher when that room was placed at Fairlawn, and that when the week before school started, on the day that teachers came back to work, that room was still in 2 pieces.
Yeah, I remember.
And they were just shocked. And not only, and I explained that it had all gotten put together, and I said, and everybody had to do what they had to do, because when it comes for it to be the first day of school, those kids show up, whether you're ready or not. So they thought that was a pretty amazing story. And in all of the classes, you know, when I did actually read in a classroom that I had taught fifth grade in, and nobody was still there who had been there long enough to know that bit of history. So it created some kind of funny conversation, but it was very fun. And there was a County School Board Association meeting, a lot of the same conversations about district mapping and changes in the guidelines, and you know how we're moving through everything. And just as an aside, since I do serve on that county committee on school district organization, one of the questions that is asked each time a district brings their adopted map to us was, how much public input did you have regarding this process? And based on, you know, what has been reported to that committee, we have had far more community input regarding it than any district other than Santa Barbara. And a lot of their input had to do with whether to remain with 5 voting districts or to go to 7. So it's, and even when the high school presented, other than the input from Oz, there had been very, very little parent input per se. So I know it may not seem that people understand, and perhaps they don't, but they do have the opportunity to be represented in my mind, with 4 of our voting districts being majority Hispanic, which includes both citizens and non-citizens. I feel very comfortable that our community has the appropriate opportunities to express their desires in terms of electing people that will represent their interests. And I can't say it enough times, I just can't imagine anyone on a school board only representing a small portion of the district. This is a position where you look out for the overall good, and parent input and feedback is far more important in terms of being at individual school sites where decisions are made about purchases for that particular school, or with the LCAP, where the plan is to provide things for all of our schools. So in the last several years, I think our community outreach and our parent outreach has grown significantly. And I'm proud of that, and really feel like we do listen to our parents. They do have a say in our LCAP and in our site-based programs and how expenditures are made. So I know not everybody is ever going to be happy, but everyone, I believe everyone in our community is represented. Thank you.
Can I just trail on with what you said? Because
just go ahead.
Because I attended the same day she was there, and I did want to say, Principal Alvarez had a leadership group. We were greeted by the leadership team. And so individuals from that council or group of children were empowered to introduce themselves to us, tell us about the site, deliver us to where we needed to go. And it was some wonderful conversations. I mean, it was fun to be on a campus. It was exciting to be talking with students, and it was so just so eventful for them because they hadn't seen people. And you'll notice John's shirt, Carolina Panthers, on campus. I know. I was in a 6th grade class, and I took the book, the Egyptian Cinderella, in, and didn't read it to them. I gave them the task of reading it and read a book entitled You Matter to them, which was really interesting because I too let them know that this was my stomping grounds way back when, and many of them go to El Camino, so I asked if they had connections and knew any of the teachers there, and many of them had siblings that had gone, so they knew some of the teachers I was mentioning. And in doing that, I really, really see the need to be on more campuses as much as possible. I've seen the need for a long time, but the excitement that you see from students, and they tell you everything because they're so excited to share all the things that are going on. But Principal Alvarez, and I believe it's the 5th and 6th grade teachers there, did a good job on preparing them. We even got a Dr. Seuss hat and goodies too, if we wanted them. I did want to mention with the county school board meeting that we attended, that they encouraged attendance at the April 28th dinner, school board dinner. It's going to be at the Red Barn, and we're just letting you know that there's going to be a dinner out there. We usually have a speaker, and I can't remember who it's going to be. McConnell? Jack O'Connell. Yes, thank you. Yeah, he will be speaking. And the other thing I wanted to mention was the connection that Dr. Salcedo shared with us on youthwell.org. She encouraged a link maybe on our websites, but it's really a very concise service, mental health connected with other services for all ranging ages in Santa Barbara County only. So these services are available to us and to our population. So she said, take a look at it, which I did, and it's very accessible. It's in Spanish and English. It's called youthwell.org, and it might be a good thing to connect to our web. And that's it for me.
Mr. Hollingshead?
First of all, I'd like to echo the sentiments about going onto the Fairlawn campus to read. I had the opportunity to read to 2nd graders and kindergartners, which was absolutely a blast. I will also reflect that those same student leaders met me, and that I invited them to come to one of our board meetings and encourage them to do that when we reopen. You know, I think we've talked about that in the past, about having more student leadership here and participating. So I extended that. If I can ask staff to follow up with that and find those 2 young ladies and have them attend one of our meetings. I made that promise, and would really love to see them here. They were very polished in their presentation, both very well spoken on their own, and just I think are really great representatives of their school, but also the folks who've been working with them. So that was really great. I brought my own book, Storm Boy, which was a favorite of my kids. It's by Paulo and Lewis. It's based in the Northwest. And I also bought a book called The Book with No Words, or no pictures, excuse me. It had words. And the 2nd graders there loved it. And then also the 2nd graders at Libin loved it too. So props to Libin too. So Miss Lathery and Mrs. Metz-Outland were a little disappointed that there wasn't a chance they felt like to ask everybody to go there too, but because my daughter's there, I asked. And I read the same books there, and it was another second grade class, so it was super fun. Recitations on all around, and so I think that contact and that interface is super important. The one other thing I do want to, the next thing I would like to address, and I don't want to, I know where Ricardo is going to go. I just know it because he told me before. He complimented my wife before. So in recognition of International Day of the Woman from yesterday and Women's recognition of Women's Month, I would be remiss in not recognizing that, but also pointing out some of the people that are I think are important in my life and in the life of the district. In my life and in this community, my mother-in-law Barbara Karamitsos has been instrumental in not being only an emblematic mother and instilling in her daughters that they could do anything they wanted in any field they wanted, and empowering them, but also living that by example in her participation in her community and her outreach to people in need. My own mother has done much the same. I don't recall ever having, Joanne Murphy is her name. I don't recall ever having the idea that the girls in my science classes or the women in my life ever had any lesser standing or lesser capacity to do everything that I was doing. And I think a lot of that was instilled in me by my mother without intent. It just was. And I took it very much for granted. And so I would express great thanks to her for that. Outside of that, we have had and have really great examples of strong women in this district that have played a part in my kids' lives. Rebecca was one of them. There have been some great women in science on our campuses, Miss Bastizzi, Sarah Cameron, Bama Medley, Nikki Wallingford, and certainly, I feel like Amy Lobsinger on the Fessler campus is a really strong advocate for our young women who are from families that they're going to be hopefully that first generation to go to college through their avid exposure. And those are just a few, really just a few. But they're the ones that have touched my kid's life. And I think we're very lucky to either have had them here in our district in the past or continue to have them. And the last would be, I don't want to choke up, is my wife. She's an exemplary person that, as Ricardo said, mentions these kinds of things every time an opportunity she gets a chance to. Her dad was and both of her parents are from partially immigrant families. Her dad was the first one to go to college. And he and her mom imparted all that to her, and she in turn has imparted it to our kids. And I can't tell you how many times somebody has told me, in addition to my wife, that the way she lives her life, the way she empowers women, has deeply influenced their life and their feelings about what they can do and what dreams they can have. So, she's pretty much the epitome of that. I'm out.
Go, Carol.
Go, Carol.
Yes.
Go, girl, go.
Mr. Valencia?
My girls go.
Yeah, I appreciate, what John's mentioning. Thank you so much for sharing that, John. I recently received in the mail the latest newsletter from the California School Board Association, which is something that we as board members definitely lean on. to get up to date on the latest research and the latest best practices for our work. I encourage all of our staff to take a look at, they have an article there acknowledging the relationship between having a diverse staff. Particularly, they look at African Americans and how when our children have access to an African American teacher, they're more likely, to do well academically, and they're more likely to go on to college. And so I know that as a board, we've passed the diversity, equity, and inclusion resolution, which demonstrates our commitment to diversity. And I'm looking forward. I know that today we discussed a lot of positions that are going to be opening up for our staff. So I'm looking forward, to seeing a diverse group of educators from various backgrounds, African American, Latino, Native American, women leaders that we know will help take our students to the next level. And so, I can definitely relate to some of what John was just sharing, because when it comes to diversity, unfortunately, I did not get the opportunity or the privilege to learn from African American teachers or Latina teachers until I went to college, until I went to UC Berkeley as an undergraduate. So it blows my mind, right, in retrospect, that I did not have the privilege of having an educator of color, from K to 12 education. But we have an opportunity to change that future for our young people, so that we know that they can see role models and that they can see that they can do it as well. So I look forward to seeing, the diversity of our staff as we continue to open up positions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, wait.
Yeah, okay, yes. Mr. Beecher? That's it. Okay, well, with that, we're going to adjourn back to closed session. We'd like to thank everybody for being and supporting in this meeting. Have a great rest of the week.
We'll see you here next time.
See you here